Greetings, lore masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers the most treacherous, desolate, and downright lethal locations in the province of Skyrim. Places where the rent is low, but the mortality rate is absolute. We aren't talking about cozy hearths in Whiterun, or the scenic views of Solitude. We are looking at the darkened corners where the environment itself is trying to kill you. You know the feeling. You load up a save, thinking you're just going to do a little crafting, maybe pick some mountain flowers, and suddenly you're being ragdolled down a cliffside by a troll who didn't appreciate your trespassing. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to the local market in Skyrim without some serious enchanted gear and a pocket full of cheese wheels, let alone these cursed locations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing the global map of our little guild light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We begin our descent into danger not in some forgotten ruin at the edge of the map, but right at the beginning. The gateway, the start of the end, Helgen. It is almost poetic that the first place most travellers see in Skyrim is also one of the absolute worst places to establish a residence. Situated in the southern mountains of Falkreath, Helgen was once known as the Gateway to the North. It sits precariously near the Pale Pass, the primary trade route connecting the snowy peaks of Skyrim to the heartland of Cyrodiil. For generations, this was a military town, a fortress of stone and timber designed to monitor traffic, tax merchants, and house the Imperial Legion's border patrols. If you were a citizen here, your life was defined by the clatter of armour and the smell of horses. It was a rigid existence, governed by the schedule of the garrison. The local inn didn't just serve weary travellers, it served soldiers looking to drink away the cold of a mountain posting. You might remember Velod, a man mentioned in passing during those frantic opening moments. He was known for making a mead with juniper berries, a small domestic detail that paints a picture of a town trying to find comfort in a harsh landscape. It suggests a community that, despite being a military checkpoint, had its own flavours, its own quiet traditions, but living in Helgen meant living in a cage that was about to be rattled by a god. The town itself is architecturally sound, or at least it was. High stone walls, a defensive keep, and watchtowers that offered a commanding view of the valley. In theory, it was safe. It was designed to repel bandit raids and stormcloak skirmishers, but stone walls are meaningless when death comes from the sky. The defining tragedy of Helgen isn't just that it was destroyed, it's that it was the testing ground for the return of the World Eater. Imagine waking up on a crisp, turdus morning. The air is cold, smelling of pine and impending snow. There is a commotion at the gates, Imperial heavy transport carts, a rare sight for a routine morning. Rumours spread quickly in small towns like this. The Jarl of Windhelm, Ulfric Stormcloak, has been captured. The High King's killer is in your town. For a resident of Helgen, this should have been a day of grim spectacle, perhaps a historical footnote you'd tell your grandchildren about. You'd stand by your window watching the procession, maybe feeling a mix of fear and patriotic duty, depending on where your loyalties lay. Then, the sound. It wasn't the horn of a legionnaire or the shout of a Nord, it was a roar that vibrated in the marrow of your bones, a sound that predates history. Alduin, the firstborn of Akatosh, did not choose a remote peak or a vast plain for his return. He chose your backyard. Living in Helgen means you are the first course at the banquet of the apocalypse. The destruction was not a slow siege, it was an immediate cataclysmic event. The sky, usually a pale, comforting grey, turned a bruised, unnatural colour as the meteor storm call was shouted into existence. This is where the reality of living in Skyrim's worst places sets in. There is no preparation for mythic horror. One moment you're wondering if the supply wagon from Falkreath is late. The next, the sky is raining magma. The layout of the town became a death trap. The narrow streets designed to funnel invaders into kill zones for archers became ovens. As Alduin landed on the tower, unleashing the fire breath shout, the timber structures didn't just catch fire, they disintegrated. The heat in that moment would have been intense enough to boil the blood in your veins before the flames even touched you. There is a specific horror in the lore regarding the way dragonfire works. It isn't just combustion, it is a tonal manipulation of reality. The dragon speaks fire, and the world agrees that it must burn. Being a resident of Helgen meant being subjected to an argument you could not win. Let's look at the core facts of the encounter. We know that General Tullius was present, overseeing the execution. We know the Thalmor ambassador Elenwen was also on site. This brings us to one of the most heated debates in the community. Why was she there? The common consensus, supported by the Thalmor dossier on Ulfric found later in the embassy, is that the Thalmor did not want Ulfric executed. They need the civil war to continue to bleed the Empire dry. A swift execution at Helgen would have ended the rebellion and potentially strengthened the Empire, which is the last thing the Dominion wants. So, if you lived in Helgen, you were unknowingly caught in a high-stakes game of 4D political chess between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion, right before a dragon flipped the board. Elenwen was likely there to demand custody of the prisoners, to delay the execution on some diplomatic technicality. But she was too late, or perhaps just in time to see her plans incinerated along with your house. And let's not forget the sheer brutality of the timeline. The attack happened so fast that the executioner barely had time to raise his axe for the second prisoner before the world ended. The chaos was absolute. If you were a civilian, where would you go? The gates were blocked by debris. The keep was locked down by soldiers trying to figure out if they were under attack by Stormcloaks or Daedra. You were trapped in a bowl of fire. Even if by some miracle you survived the initial attack, perhaps you hid in a root cellar or dove into the river that flows beneath the walls, your prospects did not improve. This is what truly makes Helgen one of the worst places to live, the aftermath. You might assume that after a dragon attack the Empire would return, they would rebuild, memorials would be erected, the Redguards or Nords would come together to heal the wound. But that didn't happen. If you return to Helgen days or weeks later, you don't find relief efforts, you find bandits. This is the grim reality of Skyrim's economy of violence. The ashes weren't even cold before marauders moved in to pick the bones of the town. They took over the ruins of the keep, setting up camp in the very spots where soldiers died screaming. They use the surviving furniture, drink the surviving mead, pour Villard's juniper brew, and sleep in the beds of the dead. Living in Helgen is a two-stage death sentence. First, you face the wrath of a god. Second, if you survive, you're displaced, homeless, and likely hunted by the scavengers who see your tragedy as a real estate opportunity. There is an obscure little detail found in the ruins that speaks to the hopelessness of the place. In the destroyed inn, if you look carefully during your return trip, perhaps while dodging the arrows of the bandits who now occupy it, you can find bottles of mead still sitting on the tables. It implies that people were mid-drink, mid-conversation when the end came. It wasn't a siege with days of warning, it was instantaneous. Furthermore, consider the Gunjar corpse found in the keep during the escape. He was a Stormcloak soldier, equipped with basic gear. But think about the logistics. The keep is a labyrinth of torture rooms and barracks. For the residents of Helgen, this military infrastructure was always there, looming over them. The torture room, overseen by the torturer and his assistant, was an active facility. Living in Helgen meant living next door to a state-sanctioned dungeon where screams were likely a common background noise long before the dragon arrived. It wasn't a happy village, it was a garrison town with a dark underbelly masquerading as a trade hub. The gateway to the north became the gateway to Sovngarde for everyone inside. The weather also plays a role here. While not as frozen as Winterhold, Helgen is high in the mountains. It is constantly overcast, prone to heavy fogs that roll down from the throat of the world. It is damp, cold, and grey. When the fire came, the thermal shock alone, the clash of freezing mountain air and magical inferno, would have created a weather system of its own, a vortex of ash and steam that choked the life out of anyone not burned to death. And we must address the Lokir of Rorikstead factor, the horse thief. He prays to the divines, Akatosh, Kinnereth, Mara, Dibella. He begs for help. And seconds later, a dragon, the child of Akatosh, appears. Some fans joke that the divines answered him, just not in the way he wanted. You want a divine intervention? Here is the most divine thing we have. It adds a layer of dark irony to the location. It is a place where prayers are answered with fire. In the end, Helgen stands as a monument to bad luck. It is the worst place to live because it has no future. Other towns in Skyrim struggle with racism, corruption, or poverty, but they exist. They persist. Helgen was wiped off the map in an afternoon. It is a ghost town, a charred skeleton on the side of a mountain, serving as a grim warning to the rest of the province. The dragons are back, and they do not care about your borders, your politics, or your juniper berry mead. If you are looking for real estate in Volkihar, keep moving. The property values here have hit rock bottom, along with the roof of the inn, the walls of the keep, and the bodies of everyone who called this place home. If Helgen is where you burn, the Ratway is where you rot. Leaving the smoking ruins of the mountains behind, we travel southeast to the Rift, a region of eternal autumn, golden birch trees and beautiful lakes. It looks idyllic from a distance, like a painting you'd hang above a fireplace. But beneath the wooden walkways of Riften, the city of thieves, lies a subterranean nightmare that makes a prison cell look like a luxury suite. We are descending into the Ratway. To live in the Ratway is to accept that you have fallen off the bottom rung of society's ladder and landed in the septic tank. This isn't just a sewer, it is a fully functioning multi-level undercity composed of crumbling masonry, leaking pipes, and the forgotten refuse of the world above. While the merchants in the market square above argue about the price of glass and fish, you are down here, fighting a skeever the size of a wolf for a half-eaten sweet roll. The atmosphere is the first thing that hits you, literally. The air here is heavy, wet, and stagnant. It carries the scent of mould, rust, and unwashed bodies, mixed with the metallic tang of blood that never quite dries in the humidity. There is no sunlight, only the flickering orange glow of torches that threaten to sputter out at any moment, leaving you in absolute darkness. And in the Ratway, darkness is not empty. It has teeth. The layout is a chaotic labyrinth of stone corridors, wooden bridges that sway precariously over cesspools, and gated alcoves that serve as bedrooms for the damned. If you were unfortunate enough to call this place home, your neighbours would not be friendly Nords borrowing a cup of sugar. They would be vagrants and lowlifes, generic designations for people who have lost their names and their minds. Consider the daily reality of a Ratway resident. You wake up on a bedroll damp with sewer condensation. The soundscape is a constant, maddening drip, drip, drip of water, punctuated by the chittering of skeevers. These aren't the cute little mice of fairy tales. Skyrim's skeevers are aggressive, disease-ridden predators that hunt in packs. Living here means sleeping with one eye open, clutching an iron dagger, knowing that if the bandits don't get you, the wildlife will gnaw your toes off. One of the core in-game facts that players often overlook while sprinting through here is the sheer defensibility of the Thieves' Guild headquarters, the Ragged Flagon. It sits at the heart of this mess, a cistern repurposed into a tavern and guild hall. To get a drink at the Flagon, you have to survive the gauntlet of the Upper Ratway. This implies that the Thieves' Guild, in its declined state, relies on the lethal environment of the sewers as a natural filter. If you can't survive the walk to the bar, you aren't tough enough to join the gang. But for the non-guild resident, the Flagon is a taunt. It's a warm lit room with mead and company, locked away behind secret doors and guild politics. You're left in the Ratway vaults, the deeper, more dangerous section where sanity goes to die. Speaking of sanity, let's talk about the locals. You have unique encounters down here that paint a vivid picture of mental decline. Take the case of Gian the Fist. He's a man living in a room filled with bear traps and hay piles, wearing the gloves of the pugilist. He doesn't use weapons, he just wants to punch things until they stop moving. Why is he there? What drove a man to dedicate his life to underground boxing with no audience? Living in the Ratway isolates you to the point where your only interaction with reality is violence. Then there's the Heffid the Deaf, and other uniquely named hostiles found in the lore-heavy corners of the vaults. They're often muttering to themselves, paranoid and terrified. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit often missed by players rushing to find Esbern. If you listen to the ambient dialogue of the unnamed lowlifes before you engage them, they aren't shouting battle cries. They are often warning you, stay back, or this is my spot. They aren't inherently evil, they are terrified. They are people pushed into a corner guarding their pile of trash because it is the only thing they own. The Ratway is a pressure cooker of paranoia, and let's discuss the plumbing. It's a gross topic but essential for a worst places to live list. Riften is built on a lake. The Ratway is effectively the drainage system for the city. Everything thrown away upstairs, trash, waste, runoff, ends up down here. You're living in the filter of the city. The disease ataxia, or rock joint, isn't just a gameplay debuff here, it's a lifestyle. The constant exposure to waste and dampness means that if you live here, you are likely chronically ill. The Ratway isn't just dirty, it is a biohazard. There is a fascinating community debate surrounding the architecture of the Ratway. Many fans have pointed out that the stonework here is surprisingly intricate, featuring arches and vaulted ceilings that seem too grand for a simple sewer. The theory suggests that the Ratway is actually the ruins of Old Riften, a previous iteration of the city that sank or was built over as the water levels of Lake Honric changed. If this is true, it adds a layer of tragic archaeology to your misery. You're squatting in the ruins of a forgotten golden age, living like a rat in the palaces of your ancestors. We must also address the Falmer in the room. During the main quest, players discover that the Falmer have sent a hit squad into the Ratway to find Esbern, the elderly blade archivist hiding in the Warrens. Imagine being a regular homeless resident of the Ratway. You're used to fighting off the occasional town guard or rival thief. Suddenly a squad of high elf justiciars in glass and elven armour marches through the muck. The clash of cultures is absurd. The Falmer, obsessed with elven supremacy and hygiene, wading through sludge to kill an old man. This highlights another danger of the Ratway. You're never truly hidden. Even in the deepest hole in Skyrim, the geopolitical conflicts of the surface will find you. Esbern thought he was safe behind his 3-foot-thick door with 1,000 tumblers, but he was still hunted. If a master spy can't find peace here, you certainly won't. And let's not forget the face sculptor Galathil, introduced in the Dawnguard expansion. She sits on a crate in the Ragged Flagon, offering to magically rearrange your facial features for a fee. It's horrific when you think about it. Flesh magic performed in a sewer. The sterilization standards must be non-existent. Yes, let me mold your bone structure with my bare hands while we sit next to this stagnant pool of water. It encapsulates the surreal horror of the place. Anything goes in the Ratway. Identity, morality, and hygiene are all fluid concepts. The lighting, or lack thereof, plays tricks on the mind. The Ratway Vaults section is particularly disorienting. It's a multi-level vertical maze where falling means breaking your legs or landing in a pit of skeevers. The sound of wind howling through cracks in the masonry creates a mournful song that never stops. It is a place of sensory deprivation and sensory overload all at once. You can't see, but you can smell everything. Survival here requires a complete abandonment of dignity. You eat what you find: hawk a loaf that fell off a cargo ship, skeever tail, which has alchemy properties but is hardly a meal, or perhaps mushrooms growing in the damp corners. You drink the water that flows from the city above, knowing exactly what is in it. It is a place where the desperate go to disappear, only to find that disappearing is a slow, painful process. The Ratway doesn't kill you quickly like the fires of Helgen. It erodes you. It takes your health, your mind, and eventually your humanity, leaving you as just another named NPC waiting to be cut down by an adventurer looking for a quest marker. If you are looking for a low-cost housing option in the Rift, maybe try a tent in the woods. The bears are dangerous, but at least the air is fresh. In the Ratway, even the air wants you dead. Climbing out of the sewers and heading north, we trade the wet rot of the Rift for the biting frost of Eastmarch. Welcome to Windhelm, the oldest human city in Skyrim. A place of ancient stone, heroic history, and unrelenting cold. But we aren't here to admire the Palace of the Kings or to drink at Candlehearth Hall. We are here to walk the narrow, icy alleys of the Grey Quarter. If the Ratway is where society's unwanted go to hide, the Grey Quarter is where they are forced to stay. This is not a slum born of economic collapse, it is a slum born of systemic segregation. Also known as the Snow Quarter, this section of the city was once just another district. But following the eruption of Red Mountain in Morrowind, waves of Dunmer refugees fled west into Skyrim. Windhelm, the closest major city to the border, took the brunt of this migration, and the Nords, in their infinite hospitality, gave them the coldest, darkest corner of the city and told them to stay put. Living in the Grey Quarter means living in a freezer. Windhelm is already freezing. It is the city of snow, but the architecture of the Grey Quarter seems designed to trap the cold. The streets are narrow, shadowed by the towering walls of the city and the looming palace above. Sunlight rarely touches the cobblestones here. While the Nords in the richer districts enjoy hearths roaring with timber, the Dunmer are often seen huddled around meagre braziers, trying to keep the blood from freezing in their veins. The social atmosphere is even colder than the weather. To live here is to be a prisoner in your own home. You walk down the street and you hear it, the slurs, the suspicion. Rolf Stone Fist, a character every player loves to hate, patrols these streets at night shouting drunken abuse at the windows. "Go back to Morrowind," he screams, as if Red Mountain isn't a smoking crater. Imagine trying to sleep, trying to raise a family, while a man walks outside your door every night threatening violence simply because your eyes are red and your skin is grey. This is the core in-game reality of the Grey Quarter. Tense, racially charged hostility. You aren't just battling the elements, you are battling your neighbours. The Nords of Windhelm, specifically the Stormcloak supporters, view the Dunmer not as refugees but as parasites or Imperial spies. It's a powder keg waiting for a spark. Let's look at the living conditions inside the cornerstone of the district, the new Neesis Corner Club. It's the only tavern in the quarter, and it serves as a community hub. But unlike the warm, inviting inns of Skyrim, the Corner Club feels desperate. The owner, Amberus Rendar, is bitter, and rightfully so. He speaks of the Nord garbage he has to deal with. The lore here paints a picture of a people who were once proud. House Hlalu, Redoran, Telvanni, now reduced to serving Sujamma in a frozen basement. There is a fascinating, obscure lore detail found in the dialogue of the local Dunmer. Some of them, like Belin Hlalu, actually own farms outside the city and try to integrate. He tells his fellow Dark Elves that their suffering is partly their own fault for refusing to adapt to Nord culture. This sparks a fierce internal debate within the community itself. So, living here isn't just about fighting Nords, it's about the internal politics of a displaced people. Do you assimilate and lose your culture, or do you isolate and freeze? It's a no-win scenario. And then there is the Butcher. We cannot talk about living in Windhelm without mentioning the serial killer stalking the streets. For a long time, the Butcher preyed on women in the city, specifically targeting those walking alone at night. While the victims were Nords, the fear permeates the entire city. But notice where the Butcher operated. In the shadows, in the graveyard, in the quiet corners. The Grey Quarter is entirely shadows and quiet corners. The guards in Windhelm are notoriously indifferent to the plight of the Dunmer. Windhelm guards, useless, as Amberus would say. If a killer started hunting in the Grey Quarter, would the Jarl even send an investigator? The residents certainly don't think so. You are unprotected. We also have to touch on the Argonian assemblage. While not technically in the Grey Quarter, it is part of the same segregation system. The Argonians aren't even allowed inside the city walls. They are forced to live on the docks, sleeping in a damp bunkhouse. The Dunmer in the Grey Quarter look down on the Argonians, and the Nords look down on both. It is a hierarchy of hate. If you are a Dunmer, you are squeezed in the middle, hated by the ruling class above you, and historically enemies with the lizard folk working the docks below you. Let's address the Imperial spy paranoia. During the Civil War, if you live in the Grey Quarter, you are assumed to be an Imperial sympathiser. The irony is that the Empire abandoned Morrowind during the Oblivion Crisis, so the Dunmer have no love for the Empire either. They are truly alone. Yet Ulfric Stormcloak's inaction regarding their treatment suggests he sees them as a potential fifth column. Living here means knowing that if the war goes badly for the Stormcloaks, the frustration of the Nord soldiers could easily turn into a pogrom directed at your front door. The architecture itself tells a story of decline. The buildings in the Grey Quarter are old, repurposed Nord structures. They're drafty and ill-maintained because the Dunmer often lack the resources or the permission to renovate. You might find banners of the great houses hanging on the walls, tattered and faded, sad reminders of a lost homeland. The grey in Grey Quarter refers to the skin of the inhabitants. Yes, but it also perfectly describes the palette of your life here. Grey stone, grey snow, grey food, grey future. There is a fan theory that suggests the layout of Windhelm is actually based on the ancient Atmoran city of kings, and the Grey Quarter occupies the district that was historically meant for servants or thralls. If true, the Dunmer have been unconsciously placed back into a role of servitude by the city's very design. They are filling a void left by ancient history, trapped in the stone memory of the city. Economically, you are stifled. The Dunmer merchants complain that Nords won't buy from them, or that the guards harass their suppliers. Revan Sadri, who runs Sadri's Used Wares, inadvertently admits to buying stolen goods just to make ends meet. When the legal economy locks you out, you are forced into the black market. This criminalizes the population, giving the Nords more proof that the Dark Elves are thieves. It is a vicious cycle that you as a resident cannot break. And finally, consider the sheer depression of the place. Unlike the Ratway, where survival is a chaotic adrenaline rush, the Grey Quarter is a slow, grinding misery. It is the misery of lost status. Many of these elves were nobles, wizards, or warriors in Morrowind. Now they are refugees in a land that hates magic and hates them. To live here is to wake up every day and look at the red mountain ash in your inventory, knowing you can never go back and knowing you will never be welcome here. It is a cold, bitter, lonely existence. The fire in the hearth provides no warmth when the hatred outside is this freezing. In the Grey Quarter, you don't die from a dragon or a trap. You die from the cold shoulder of a city that wishes you weren't there. From the freezing alleys of the east, we journey all the way to the jagged, rocky western edge of the province. Welcome to the Reach, a land of craggy mountains, twisted juniper trees and Markarth, the city of stone. If Windhelm is a cold shoulder, Markarth is a cold, hard fist to the gut. And nowhere is that fist clenched tighter than in the Warrens. Markarth is a vertical city, carved directly into the mountain by the lost Dwemer race. The wealthy Silverbloods live at the top, basking in the sun and the view. The merchants and craftsmen live in the middle, and you live at the bottom, literally. The Warrens are situated at the lowest traversable point of the city, right next to the smelters and the toxic runoff of the silver mines. To live here is to be crushed by the weight of the entire city above you. This is not a neighbourhood, it is a hive. A single, suffocating tunnel carved into the rock that serves as a communal dormitory for the sick, the poor, and the unwanted. When you walk into the Warrens, the first thing you notice is the air. It doesn't circulate, it hangs heavy, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale bread, and the metallic tang of silver dust that drifts in from the smelter outside. You're greeted at the door by Garvey, a Breton with a tired voice who serves as the unofficial gatekeeper. He doesn't ask for your name or your business. He asks, "You sick? You dying? If you aren't, you don't belong here." That is the entrance exam for residency in the Warrens. You have to be broken just to get in. Garvey himself keeps the place clean, which in Markarth terms means dragging out the bodies of those who didn't survive the night, so there's room for the next poor soul. Let's talk about the architecture. This is Dwemer stone. It is ancient, indestructible, and completely alien to human comfort. In a normal house, wood warms up. It breathes. Stone does not. The walls of the Warren suck the heat right out of your body. The floors are uneven metal and rock. There are no doors on the individual sleeping alcoves, just rag curtains that do nothing to block out the sound of your neighbour coughing up blood or the weeping of someone who lost their job at the smelter. A core in-game fact that players often encounter here is the presence of the Forsworn conspiracy. The Warrens isn't just a slum, it is a breeding ground for terrorism. Waylin, the man who murders Margaret in the market square in the very first scene of entering Markarth, lived here. When you search his room, you find a note directing him to strike fear into the hearts of the Nords. Living in the Warrens means you are sleeping next to sleeper agents. The quiet man sharpening a shiv in the corner might be a beggar, or he might be a reachman waiting for the order to slit a throat. The tension is palpable. You are caught between the brutal oppression of the Nords and the violent retribution of the Forsworn. And then there are the neighbours. Take Keren, for instance. She's a fixture of the Warrens, usually found sitting or lying on the floor staring at nothing. She mentions wanting to go to the temple to get healed, but she can't make the climb. It's a stark, heartbreaking reality of Markarth's design. The Temple of Dibella and the Hall of the Dead are high up or far away. If you are too weak to walk the stairs, you don't get healed, you rot. The verticality of the city acts as a natural filter, keeping the undesirables trapped at the bottom by simple gravity and exhaustion. There is an obscure bit of lore regarding the Dwemer metal found in these ruins. We know the Dwemer used tonal architecture, sound and vibration, to shape their world. Some fans have theorized that the constant low-frequency humming, often heard in Dwemer ruins and present in the background audio of Markarth, actually has a psychological effect on non-Dwemer races. It causes anxiety, aggression, and paranoia. If this theory holds water, living in the Warrens means you are being slowly driven mad by the walls themselves. You are living inside a machine that was never built for you, and the machine is humming a song that makes you want to scream. Hygiene here is non-existent. Markarth has grand waterfalls and aqueducts, feats of engineering that have lasted eras, but in the Warrens, you are downstream from everything. The water that flows past the entrance has already washed the streets, the market, and the mines. You are drinking the city's backwash. It is no wonder that rockjoint and ataxia are common topics of conversation. Let's consider the economic trap. Most residents of the Warrens work at the smelter right outside. It is backbreaking, hot, dangerous work. You breathe in smoke and metal filings all day, then you crawl back into your freezing stone hole at night. The Silverblood family owns the mine, the smelter and the jail. They pay you a pittance, which you likely spend on meat sold by Hogni Redarm, we'll get to him, and the cycle continues. You are an indentured servant in all but name, grinding your life away to make Thonar Silverblood slightly richer. Speaking of Hogni Redarm and the food supply, living in the Warrens puts you in dangerous proximity to the Taste of Death questline. We know that the cult of Namira, cannibals, operates in the Reach. Iola, the leader, hangs around the Hall of the Dead, but where do you think she scouts for members, or victims? The Warrens is a buffet of forgotten people. If a beggar disappears from his bedroll, who investigates? The guards. They don't even come down here unless it's to arrest someone. Living here means you are prey. You might be eating a stew that contains your missing neighbour, or you might be the main ingredient in next week's stew. The lighting in the Warrens is perpetually dim. It's a cave, lit by a few sputtering candles, and the glow of the smelter fires outside. You lose track of time, day and night blur into a single grey existence. The lack of sunlight contributes to the poor health of the residents, leaving them pale and gaunt. It's a stark contrast to the golden armour of the guards patrolling the heights. There is also a community debate about whether the Warrens or Sidnamine is the worse fate. Sidnamine is a prison, yes, forced labour. But the Warrens is essentially a prison without walls. The residents are just as trapped by poverty as the prisoners are by bars. In fact, many residents of the Warrens eventually end up in Sidnamine anyway. It's a pipeline. You lose your job, you steal a loaf of bread, you go to the mine. The Warrens is just the waiting room for the jail. We must also acknowledge the Riften factor. He's the brawler you meet in the rat-infested corners of the city. The violence in Markarth is casual and brutal. In the Warrens, disputes aren't settled by the law. They are settled by fists or shivs. You have to be tough to survive, but being tough makes you a target for the Forsworn recruiters or the Silverblood enforcers. It's a delicate balance of looking dangerous enough to be left alone, but not dangerous enough to be considered a threat. Finally, there is the crushing lack of hope. In other cities, you might dream of moving up. In Whiterun, you could work a farm and buy a house. In Solitude, you could join the Legion. In Markarth, the stone ceiling is literal and metaphorical. The Nords hate the Reachmen hate the Nords, and the Dwemer hate everyone. The Warrens is the sediment at the bottom of a glass of poison. As you lay your head on that cold stone slab, listening to the cough of a dying miner and the distant grinding of the smelter, you realise that Markarth is not a city of gold. It is a city of blood and silver, and you are the fuel that keeps the fires burning. Leaving the grinding stone gears of Markarth behind, we travel north and east, descending into the lowlands of Yalmarch. If Markarth is a fist to the gut, Morthal is a wet, cold blanket draped over your face while you try to sleep. Welcome to the Swamp of Sorrows. Morthal is the town that Skyrim forgot. It sits deep within the Draigmere Marsh, a sprawling expanse of freezing fog, blackened trees, and water that looks like it has been stagnant since the Merethic era. Most adventurers only come here for two reasons: to cure their vampirism, or because they took a wrong turn on the way to Solitude. But for the people who live here, this dismal bog is home. To live in Morthal is to live in a state of perpetual dampness. You know that feeling when you step in a puddle with socks on, and you can't change them for the rest of the day? That is the Morthal experience. The town is built on a series of wooden docks and stilts hovering just above the mud. The air is thick with humidity, but because this is Skyrim, it's freezing humidity. It seeps through your fur armour, through your wool tunic, and settles right into your joints. The locals probably don't walk with a stoop because of age. They do it because the moisture has rusted their knees. Let's look at the town layout. It is shockingly defenceless. Whiterun has walls, Solitude has a mountain, Even the smaller villages usually have a palisade or some favourable terrain. Morthal has fog. The town is completely open to the surrounding marsh. This means that if a pack of wolves, a frostbite spider, or a confused giant decides to wander through the main street, there is absolutely nothing stopping them. Living here means your front door is the only thing separating you from the hostile wilderness, and considering most Nord doors are wood and the local wildlife includes chorus, giant acid-spitting insects, that door might as well be made of wet paper. The core in-game fact that defines life in Morthal is the vampire conspiracy. Players know this as the quest laid to rest, but for a resident it is a waking nightmare. Hrogar's house burned down, killing his wife and child. The next day he's shacked up with Alva. Everyone in town knows something is wrong. They whisper about it at the Moorside Inn. They suspect Alva is a vampire or a witch or just bad news. But nobody does anything. Imagine the psychological toll of that apathy. You're living in a town so beaten down by the environment that when a house burns down and a neighbour starts acting possessed, the collective response is a shrug and a murmur into a tankard of watered-down mead. You are living next door to a predator. Alva isn't just a bad neighbour. She's a vampire seducing the guards and turning the town into a pantry for her master, Movarth. If you live in Morthal, you aren't a citizen. You're slow-walking cattle waiting for the slaughter. The economy here is non-existent. There is a lumber mill owned by the Jarl's husband, and that's it. There is no general store. Let me repeat that. A hold capital does not have a general store. If you need a loaf of bread, a new shirt, or a tool that isn't an axe, you have to rely on the Thaumaturgist's hut, an alchemy shop run by Lami. So, unless you can survive on a diet of fungal pods and swamp jellies, you are out of luck. The isolation is total. You are miles away from the nearest trade route, surrounded by treacherous terrain that bogs down carts and drowns horses. We have to talk about the flora. Morthal is the capital of the Deathbell flower. They grow everywhere here. In lore, the Deathbell is known for its use in potent poisons. It's a beautiful, drooping purple flower, but the fact that it thrives here tells you everything you need to know about the soil. The land itself is poisonous. Residents essentially landscape their gardens with arsenic. It's a goth gardener's paradise perhaps, but a farmer's hell. Then there is the Jarl, Idgrod Ravencrone. She's one of the most unique characters in the game, an elderly woman who claims to have visions. The community debate around Idgrod is fascinating. Is she actually a seer, blessed with the sight? Or is she suffering from senility or perhaps mild hallucinogenic poisoning from the swamp gas? She wanders the High Moon Hall speaking in riddles, while her steward and husband try to keep the hold running. If you are a commoner with a grievance, say a crab stole your chickens, good luck getting a straight answer from your leader. She's more likely to tell you that the roots are deep than to send a guard to help. And speaking of guards, the Morthal guard force is notoriously the most bored and seemingly incompetent in the province. They stand around in the fog complaining about the cold, while a vampire lair operates openly just up the hill. It's not really their fault. Who would want to patrol a swamp where the fog is so thick you can't see your own boots? But for a resident, it means the lore is more of a suggestion than a reality. There is an obscure lore tidbit involving Falion, the Redguard wizard who lives on the edge of town. He is a master of conjuration, and the only person in Skyrim who knows the ritual to cure vampirism. But if you dig into his dialogue, he mentions that he met the Dwemer. Not their ghosts, but the race itself. This implies he has walked the plains of oblivion or travelled through time. He is a being of immense power, casually living in a shack in Morthal. Why? Lore theorists suggest that Morthal might be a thin place in reality, a spot where the barrier between Mundus and oblivion is weak. The swamp is filled with wisps and ghosts. The nearby Labyrinthian radiates ancient, unstable magic. Falion is likely there to study, or guard, this breach. So living in Morthal means you are unknowingly camping on a metaphysical fault line. You aren't just dealing with mud, you're dealing with the runoff of magical radiation. Let's consider the soundscape. Morthal is quiet. Too quiet. In Whiterun you hear the forge and the preacher. In Riften, the market. In Morthal, you hear the wind in the dead trees and the distant buzzing of nern roots. It's an ASMR trigger for anxiety. The silence is heavy, broken only by the splash of something moving in the water nearby. Is it a mud crab? A slaughterfish? Or a Dremora lord summoned by a novice conjurer in the marshes? You never know until it's eating you. The social life is restricted to the Moorside Inn, which is arguably the most depressing tavern in Skyrim. The bard, Lurbuk, is an orc with a voice so bad that there is literally a Dark Brotherhood contract to kill him just to make him stop singing. This is a real quest. The locals hate his singing so much they pooled their money to have him assassinated. That is the level of petty misery we are dealing with. When the highlight of your week is putting a hit out on the local karaoke singer, your town has issues, and we can't ignore the chorus. These are not just bugs, they are armoured nightmares that usually live deep underground. But in the swamps of Yarmarch they roam the surface. A Chorus Reaper can kill a heavily armoured soldier in seconds. In Morthal, they are essentially raccoons. You go to take out the trash, and you get dissolved by acid. There is a fan theory that the entire town is slowly sinking. If you look at the architecture, the stilts seem precarious. The water level is high, the ground is soft. It is entirely possible that within a generation, Morthal will be nothing more than a few rooftops sticking out of the bog, a submerged monument to the stubbornness of Nords who refuse to move 5 miles up the road to drier land. The ghost of Old Hroldan is a famous tale, but Morthal has its own ghost story, the ghost of the little girl, Helgi. She died in the fire and now haunts the burned-out ruins. Living in Morthal means your children play hide-and-seek with the vengeful spirits of murder victims. It is a town where the dead are more active than the living. The colour palette of your life here is 50 shades of brown and grey. The sun rarely breaks through the mist. You live in a twilight world where time feels suspended. It is a place of stagnation. People don't leave Morthal because they have ambition. They leave because they finally snapped. And those who stay, they become like the swamp itself, hardened, silent, and a little bit toxic. If you are looking for a quiet life, Morthal offers it. But it's the quiet of a grave. The rent is cheap, sure, but the cost of living is your soul, slowly leached away by the fog, the vampires, and the endless freezing rain. If Morthal is a wet blanket, Dawnstar is a sheet of ice wrapped around your throat. Leaving the fog of the marshes, we travel due north until we hit the ocean, specifically the Sea of Ghosts. Here, on the very edge of the playable map, clinging to the rocky coastline like a barnacle that refuses to let go, lies the capital of the Pale, Dawnstar. The name sounds hopeful, doesn't it? It evokes images of a rising sun, a new beginning. But if you decide to move here, the only thing rising will be your blood pressure and your heating bill. Dawnstar is the definition of remote. It is a port town, technically, but half the time the harbour is choked with ice floes. The wind here doesn't just blow, it screams. It comes tearing off the northern glaciers, carrying shards of ice that scour the wood from the buildings and the skin from your face. To live in Dawnstar is to be in a constant battle with hypothermia. The architecture is standard Nord timber, but looking at it, you get the sense that the buildings are huddled together for warmth, shivering against the landscape. But the cold is the least of your worries. The true horror of living in Dawnstar is inside your own head. This brings us to the core in-game fact that defines the Dawnstar experience, the nightmares. When the Dragonborn first arrives, the town is in the grip of a collective psychosis. Everyone, from the Jarl to the miners, is suffering from horrific, debilitating nightmares. This isn't just a case of eating bad cheese before bed. This is a magical affliction caused by the Skull of Corruption, a Daedric artifact of Vermina, the Prince of Dreams and Nightmares. Imagine the reality of this. You work a 14-hour shift in the freezing iron mines. Your body is aching, your fingers are numb. All you want is to close your eyes and drift off, but you can't, because you know that the moment you fall asleep your mind will be invaded by visions of terror so potent they drain your actual life force. The entire town is sleep deprived. Have you ever tried to deal with a neighbour who hasn't slept in 3 weeks? Now imagine an entire zip code of them. The tension in Dawnstar is razor thin. Arguments break out over nothing. People are jumpy, paranoid, and physically deteriorating. The source of this misery is Nightcaller Temple, an ancient ruin looming on the cliff just above the town. For a resident, this is like living at the foot of an active volcano, except instead of lava, it spews psychological trauma. The temple was once a battleground between Vermina's cultists and orcs, and the miasma of that conflict has never left. You are breathing in the exhaust fumes of a Daedric prince every time you inhale. Let's talk about the economy, which is almost entirely based on 2 mines, Ironbreaker and Quicksilver. This creates a bitter divide in the town. Betild runs the iron mine, and Ligelf runs the quicksilver mine. They hate each other, and I don't mean a friendly business, rivalry. I mean, I will pay an assassin to kill you hatred. Indeed, during the Dark Brotherhood questline, the player is hired to kill Betild. This is the social climate of Dawnstar. Your boss might be murdered in broad daylight because of a dispute over ore quotas. And speaking of the Dark Brotherhood, we have to address the elephant, or rather the black door in the room. Dawnstar is home to the final, fully operational Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in Skyrim. It is hidden just outside the town limits, tucked into the rocks near the shoreline. Think about what this means for property values. You're living next door to the headquarters of the most notorious guild of assassins in Tamrielic history. While you're trying to fish for slaughterfish on the docks, the listener is walking by with a dripping dagger and a jester who talks to a corpse in a coffin. The presence of the sanctuary brings a specific kind of darkness to the area. It implies that Dawnstar is a place where death is comfortable. It is a haven for murderers. If the Brotherhood feels safe here, you probably shouldn't. Then there is the Mythic Dawn Museum. This is an obscure lore tidbit that is actually a massive red flag for anyone with a basic knowledge of history. Silas Vesuvius, a local resident, has turned his house into a shrine to the Mythic Dawn, the very cult that assassinated the Emperor, opened the Oblivion Gates, and nearly destroyed the world 200 years ago. Imagine moving to a small town and finding out your neighbour has a museum dedicated to the apocalypse in his living room. He has robes, daggers, and commentaries from Mankar Cameron on display. He invites people in to look at them. Hey, come check out the razor that started the crisis. This is insanely dangerous. It attracts the attention of Mehrunes Dagon, the Prince of Destruction. By living next to Silas, you are essentially living next to a beacon for Daedric intervention. It is a wonder the vigilance of Stendarr haven't burned the whole town down just to be safe. The leadership in Dawnstar is also concerning. Jarl Skald the Elder is a senile, warmongering fanatic. He is obsessed with the Stormcloak Rebellion, but he's too old to fight, so he just yells at everyone. He threatens his servants, ignores the plight of the miners, and demands that the Legion be crushed while his own town is falling apart from lack of sleep. His court is a disaster. Brina Merilis, the former Legion legate who lives in town, watches him with a mix of pity and alarm. If the town is attacked, Skald is not the man you want in charge. He's the guy who would order a charge into a dragon's mouth because he thinks Talos told him to. The wildlife around Dawnstar is particularly aggressive. Because it is in the Pale, the region is teeming with snow bears and snowy saber cats. These are the apex predators of the Skyrim fauna. A regular bear is bad, a snow bear is a tank with fur. They are faster, stronger, and angrier, and they wander right up to the town gates. But the real threat comes from the giants. There is a giant camp, Red Road Pass, located frighteningly close to the town. It is a common occurrence for players to fast travel to Dawnstar and immediately see a giant attacking the Jarl's longhouse. Living here means you might step out for a quart of milk and get launched into the stratosphere by a mammoth herder who wandered a bit too far south. The town walls, if you can even call them that, are low wooden fences. They won't stop a giant. They won't even stop a determined goat. There is a fascinating community debate regarding the Pale Lady. Just south of Dawnstar lies a crypt where a unique Wisp Mother, the Pale Lady, resides. Some lore enthusiasts theorize that the entire region of the Pale is named after her, or entities like her. The theory suggests that the land itself is cursed to drain the warmth and life from its inhabitants. Wisp Mothers are associated with stealing children and luring travellers to their deaths. If the region is their breeding ground, then Dawnstar is just a buffet table for these spectral horrors. The cold isn't just weather, it's a supernatural force. Let's look at the logistics of living here. Dawnstar is the end of the line. There are no roads going further north. The ocean is treacherous, filled with hawkers and the wreckage of ships that tried to navigate the ice. The Sea of Ghosts is aptly named. Ysgramor landed near here, yes, but he was a legendary hero. You're just a guy trying to not get frostbite. If you run out of food in the winter, you're cut off. The passes to the south get blocked by snow. You're stuck on a rock with a senile Jarl, a museum of evil, and a population of insomniacs. The Khajiit caravans camp outside the town sometimes. They are the only splash of colour in a world of white and grey. But even they aren't allowed inside. They sit by their fires in the snow, selling moon sugar to the miners who are desperate for any kind of escape. The fact that the drug dealers are the most stable element of the local economy says a lot. There is also the Sanctuary Guardian ghost to consider. If you play through the Dark Brotherhood questline, you know the Dawnstar Sanctuary is haunted by the spectral assassin, Lucien Lachance. While he is a summon for the player, his presence implies that the ghosts of the Brotherhood never really leave. The soil of Dawnstar is saturated with the blood of contracts past. Even the inn, the Windpeak Inn, is gloomy. Thoring, the innkeeper, is a nice enough man, but his daughter Karita is the bard, and like Lurbuck in Morthal, she's trying her best, but the songs she sings are melancholy. The Age of Aggression sounds particularly hopeless when sung in a drafty hall where everyone is too tired to clap. In Dawnstar, you're always waiting. Waiting for the snow to stop. Waiting for the ship to arrive. Waiting for the nightmares to end. It is a place of suspension. You aren't really living. You're enduring. You're preserving yourself in ice, hoping that one day the thaw will come. But in the Pale, the thaw never comes. The wind howls through the cracks in the floorboards, sounding like the screams of the victims from the sanctuary down the road. You pull your furs tighter, stare at the ceiling, and pray that tonight, just for once, you won't dream. But you know you will, and in Dawnstar, the dreams are realer than the day. If Dawnstar is the end of the line, Winterhold is where the line snapped, fell off the cliff, and sank into the frozen ocean. Continuing our trek east along the most inhospitable coastline in Tamriel, we arrive at a location that serves as a tragic monument to the phrase past its prime, Winterhold. Once the capital of Skyrim, a bustling metropolis of culture, trade and power that rivaled Solitude, it is now little more than a few rotting wooden shacks clinging desperately to a precipice that is actively trying to kill them. To call it a city is an act of charity. To call it a home is an act of madness. Living in Winterhold is an exercise in vertigo and existential dread. The geography itself is your enemy. The town sits on a narrow, jagged promontory jutting out into the Sea of Ghosts. The wind here is not just weather, it is a physical assault. It screams up the cliff face, carrying the salt spray of the ocean which freezes instantly upon contact with the stone, coating the entire settlement in a perpetual layer of rime ice. There is no shelter. The mountains to the south funnel the blizzards directly into your front door, and the ocean to the north promises a swift freezing death if you take one wrong step in the dark. The defining event of this location, and the core in-game fact that every resident is painfully aware of, is the Great Collapse. In the year 4E122, a series of monstrous storms battered the coast. The sea rose up, the ground shook, and in a single terrifying night, the majority of the city slid into the waves. Imagine the trauma of that legacy. You are living in the surviving sliver of a disaster zone. Every time the wind howls a little too loud, or the ground shudders from a frost troll's footsteps, the locals must wonder, is this it? Is the rest of the cliff going today? It creates a psychology of transience. Why build a sturdy stone house when the foundation might be underwater next week? The architecture of the remaining town reflects this defeatism. The Jarl's Longhouse isn't a grand fortress, it's a glorified barn. The inn, the Frozen Hearth, is dark and cramped. The few houses that remain are huddled together as if terror has magnetized them. There is a pervasive sense that Winterhold is a ghost town that hasn't realized it's dead yet. And then there is the college. You cannot talk about living in Winterhold without addressing the massive magical fortress floating just off the coast. The College of Winterhold is the only structure that survived the Great Collapse completely unscathed. For the mages, this is proof of their superior protection spells. For the locals, it is proof of their guilt. This brings us to one of the most enduring community debates and in-game conspiracy theories. Did the college cause the Great Collapse? The official story blamed the eruption of Red Mountain and the subsequent tsunamis, but the locals, led by the bitter Jarl Courier, believe the mages were meddling with forces they didn't understand. If you live in Winterhold, you're likely on the anti-mage side of this fence. You look across that precarious stone bridge at the soaring towers of the college, glowing with magical light, while your own roof leaks and your children go hungry. The disparity in wealth and security is infuriating. The mages have warm beds, libraries and food imported from who knows where. You have snowberries and resentment. Living here means being caught in a cold war between the town and the gown. The mages rarely come out, and when they do, they're often arrogant or dangerous. You might be sweeping your porch when an experimental alteration spell goes wrong and turns your goat into a pile of ash. Or worse, you might encounter the magic anomalies, crackling balls of raw blue energy that float through the town during the college questline. These things are fast, they hit hard, and they don't care if you're a bandit or a beggar. Living in Winterhold means your daily commute involves dodging rogue sentient geometry. The economy is shattered. Winterhold has no industry. The port is gone, swallowed by the sea. There are no mines. There is no farmland. The ground is permafrost rock. The only shop is Burner's Oddments, a tragic little store where the proprietor will literally beg you to buy a dragon claw she found, just so she can keep the lights on. Her brother Ranmir drinks himself into a stupor at the inn every night, mourning a lost love and the hopelessness of his existence. This is the social circle you're joining. Alcoholism here isn't a vice, it's the only available hobby. Let's delve into an obscure lore tidbit that makes the location even more horrifying. Beneath the college lies the Midden, a subterranean trash heap and dungeon. While technically part of the college, the horrors down there don't respect boundaries. The Midden houses the Atronach Forge, a device for summoning Daedra, and the Augur of Dunlane. The Augur was once a brilliant student who became fused with the magical energies of the college. He is now a glowing ball of non-corporeal light that lives in the filth, speaking in riddles. Think about the implications. The college is dumping its magical waste and failed experiments into the ice caves right next to the town. You're sleeping a few hundred yards away from a Daedric summoning circle and a disembodied conscious entity that radiates power. The groundwater, if there is any liquid water left, is likely contaminated with magicka. Perhaps that explains why the locals are so angry. They are suffering from magical radiation poisoning. Safety is a joke. The town has no walls. None. It is completely exposed to the wilderness. Packs of wolves roam the main street. Hawkers heave themselves up onto the ice floes. And then there are the frost trolls. The road leading south out of Winterhold is notorious for being a troll hunting ground. If you want to leave, you have to fight your way out. You are trapped on a peninsula of ice, blockaded by monsters. There is also the Daedric relic factor. The Shrine of Azura stands high on a mountain peak just south of the town. While Azura is not the most malevolent of princes, her presence draws pilgrims, cultists, and Dremora. The verticality of the region means that even if you aren't directly involved, the shadow of the Daedra looms over you. The statue is massive, visible from the town, a constant reminder that higher powers are watching, and they do not care about your frozen toes. The weather in Winterhold is arguably the worst in the entire game. The game engine actually has specific weather codes for this region that increase the frequency of snowstorms. It is almost never sunny here. The skies are perpetual bruised purple or a blinding whiteout. The concept of summer is a myth told to children to stop them from crying. If you live here, you live in eternal winter. Your crops die. Your livestock freezes. You freeze. Let's consider the fate of the missing residents. During the quest to find the Staff of Magnus, the player encounters magical barriers and chaos engulfing the college. But the town is right there. When the Eye of Magnus begins to destabilize, the tremors are felt in the inn. The magical pulses that shake the screen aren't just special effects, they are tectonic threats to the cliffside. Living in Winterhold during the events of the game means living through a slow-motion nuclear meltdown next door. Moreover, the Jarl is obsessed with the Helm of Winterhold, a relic of the city's past glory. He sends adventurers into dangerous ruins to find it, believing it will restore the town's authority. It's a delusion. A helmet won't bring back the land that fell into the sea. It won't rebuild the walls. It speaks to the leadership's inability to move on. They are governing a graveyard, trying to tax the ghosts. Even the jail is a horror show. It is known as the Chill. It is not a building in the town. It is an ice cave located on a remote island far out in the freezing ocean. If you commit a crime in Winterhold, say stealing a loaf of bread to survive, the guards row you out to a glacier, throw you in a cage with a frost Atronach guarding the door, and leave you there. The punishment for petty theft is death by exposure. It is the most inhumane prison system in Skyrim, which is saying something. There is a profound loneliness to Winterhold. The music here often shifts to the sparse, high-pitched piano notes of the soundtrack, emphasizing the vast emptiness. You're on the edge of the world. Look north, and there is nothing but ice until you hit the atmosphere. Look south, and it's mountains that don't want you to cross them. You're isolated, forgotten, and slowly sliding into oblivion. If the physical cold doesn't get you, the bitterness will. You watch the mages up in their tower, casting light spells and eating apple pies, while you gnaw on a piece of dried. Salmon and pray the cliff holds for one more night. Winterhold isn't a place to live, it's a place to wait for the end. Leaving the frozen, shattering cliffs of Winterhold, we trek back across the province, returning to the jagged, sun-baked canyons of the Reach. But this time, we aren't hiding in the stone bowels of Markarth. We're standing out in the open, exposed and vulnerable, in the mining hamlet of Karthwasten. If Markarth is a prison, Karthwasten is a cage match where the referee has been bribed and the door is locked from the outside. On the map, it looks like a quiet, industrious settlement. A couple of houses, a mine, a few workers. It's the kind of place you might pass by without a second glance while chasing a quest marker. But if you stop and listen to the wind howling through the canyon, you'll hear the sound of a town being slowly strangled to death. To live in Karthwasten is to be a pawn in a game played by violent lunatics. The town is ostensibly a silver mining community, but in reality it is a battlefield. The core in-game fact that dominates life here is the hostile takeover attempt by the Silverblood family. When the Dragonborn arrives, the mines aren't ringing with the sound of pickaxes, they are silent. Why? Because a band of mercenaries, led by a thug named Ater, has seized the mine. They aren't bandits, they are security hired by Thonar Silverblood to bully the local owner into selling his land. Imagine this daily reality. You are a miner. You wake up in your dusty miner's clothes, grab your pickaxe and walk to your job site, only to be blocked by a wall of armed Nords in steel plate armour. They call you names, push you into the dirt and tell you that you don't work today. No work means no ore. No ore means no coin. No coin means you don't eat. The entire town is being held hostage economically. You're watching your livelihood being stolen in broad daylight, and because the Silverbloods own the Jarl in Markarth, there is absolutely no one coming to help you. The guards patrol the road, but they look the other way. The owner of the land, Einethach, is a man living in a special kind of hell. He's a Reachman, a native of this rocky land, but he isn't one of the Forsworn. He's a civilized, tax-paying citizen who just wants to run his family business. This places him, and by extension you as his tenant, in the crosshairs of a massive cultural conflict. To the Nords and the Silverbloods, Einethach is a savage who is squatting on their silver. They don't respect his property rights, because they don't respect his race. But the danger doesn't just come from the Nords. This brings us to the terrifying reality of the Reach itself. Karthwasten has no walls, it has no gate, it sits nestled in a valley surrounded by high cliffs. And what lives in those cliffs? The Forsworn. The hills above Karthwasten are crawling with the madmen of the Reach. To the Forsworn, Einethach and the residents of Karthwasten are traitors. They are collaborators who have bowed to the Nord invaders, so living here means you are hated by the Nords for being Reachmen or working for one, and hated by the Reachmen for being too Nord. You're in the middle of a Venn diagram of hatred. Let's discuss the kidnapping of Fjotra. This is a specific event that shatters any illusion of safety. Enman and Mina are a couple living in the town. They are just regular people trying to scrape by. One day, the Forsworn raid the town and kidnap their young daughter, Fjotra. They don't kill her. They take her to Broken Tower Redoubt to become a Sibyl of Dibella. Think about the implications of that event. A war party of Forsworn descended on the village, grabbed a child, and left. The mercenaries sitting at the mine entrance, the ones supposedly there for protection, did nothing. The town guards did nothing. Enman, a simple miner, is left pleading with strangers to help him get his little girl back. If you live in Karthwasten, you know that if you're taken in the night, no one is coming for you. You're on your own against an army of Briarhearts and Hagravens. The geography creates a sense of claustrophobia despite being outdoors. The Reach is vertical. The mountains loom over the town, casting long, jagged shadows early in the afternoon. It feels like the land itself is closing in. The flora is twisted, juniper trees that look like gnarled hands, hanging moss that obscures your vision. It is a harsh, dry landscape, where the dust coats your throat and the sun glares off the grey stone. We must touch on the obscure lore regarding the Reach's sovereignty. Historically, the Reach has changed hands more times than a stolen sweet roll. It has been an independent kingdom, a vassal of the Empire, a part of Skyrim, and a part of High Rock. The madmen claim it is their ancestral home, and they have a point. The old gods they worship are ancient primal forces. There is a theory among lore scholars that the very soil of the Reach is corrupted by the Heartstones of Lorcan, or some other deep bloody magic. This explains why the Briar Heart rituals work. Replacing a human heart with the seed of the land creates a super soldier. Living in Karthwasten means living on top of this blood-soaked soil. The silver you're mining isn't just metal. It's the veins of a land that wants to hurt you. Some miners whisper that the silver screams when you strike it. Maybe it's just the acoustics of the mine, or maybe it's the guilt of stripping the land that the Forsworn hold sacred. The community debate here is fierce. Who are the bad guys? The Silverbloods are clearly mafia-style villains using capitalism as a weapon, but the Forsworn are sacrificing people to hagravens. Many players struggle with this nuance. Is it better to be oppressed by a corrupt government, or slaughtered by religious extremists? In Karthwasten, you don't get to debate on Reddit. You have to live the answer. The answer is that both sides will kill you. They just use different tools. One uses a foreclosure notice, the other uses an axe, made of bone. Let's look at the Sanyorak mine itself. It is the lifeblood of the town. But mines in Skyrim are notoriously dangerous. Even without the mercenaries, you are dealing with the risk of collapse, gas pockets, and breaking into unexpected farmer tunnels. But in Karthwasten, the mine is also a trap. If the Forsworn attack, the villagers often flee into the mine. Imagine huddling in the dark, deep underground, listening to the screams outside, hoping the wooden bracing holds and the air doesn't run out. It's a tomb with a paycheck. The social atmosphere is incredibly tense. Mina, Enmund's wife, is sharp-tongued and stressed, constantly berating her husband. It's easy to judge her as annoying, but consider her context. Her daughter was stolen, her husband is useless in a fight, and her town is occupied. That is the sound of Karthwasten, the bickering of terrified people who have nowhere to go. There is no laughter here. There is only the sound of metal on rock and the hushed whispers of people afraid to speak too loudly lest Atar's men hear them. Economically, Karthwasten is a dead end. Even if Ainathak manages to keep the mine, the Silverbloods control the trade routes. They can strangle the town simply by refusing to buy the silver or charging exorbitant tariffs to move it. The town is an island of resistance in a sea of Silverblood influence. Eventually the tide will rise. Ainathak is fighting a losing battle, and as his tenant you are going down with the ship. We also have to talk about the wildlife. The Reach is home to saber-cats, bears, and the occasional dragon that likes to perch on the cliffs. But the real pest here is the hagraven. These birdwitch hybrids are terrifyingly intelligent. They lead the Forsworn, they have magic, and they are always watching. You might see a crow sitting on your fence post and wonder, is that just a bird or is it a spy for the matriarch at Drudak Redoubt? The broken tower redoubt is visible from the region. It stands as a constant reminder of the Forsworn power. It's a massive fortress, far larger and more defensible than Karthwasten. The balance of power is visually obvious. The rebels have the castle, the citizens have the shacks, and let's not forget the casual violence of the mercenaries. Atar and his men are essentially bored soldiers. They drink, they gamble, and they look for entertainment. If you are a villager, you are the entertainment. A misplaced look, a stumble in the mud, anything could set them off. You're walking on eggshells around men who kill for a living and are currently being paid to be arseholes. There is a distinct lack of religious comfort here too. The Temple of Dibella is in Markarth. The shrines are far away. The only religion that's active in the area is the bloody worship of the Forsworn. You might find a shrine to Zenithar, god of work, in the mine, but he seems to have abandoned this place. Hard work here doesn't get you ahead. It just gets you noticed by people who want to take what you have. In the end, Karthwasten is the worst kind of tragedy, a quiet one. It won't be destroyed by a world-ending dragon or a vampire sun-blotting ritual. It will simply be squeezed until it pops. One day, Ainathak will have an accident, the Silverbloods will take the deed, and the current residents will be evicted or buried in the slag heap. Until then, you keep your head down, you swing your pickaxe, and you try not to look at the hills because you know the hills are looking back at you, leaving the suffocating canyons of the Reach and the silver-choked misery of Karthwasten. we descend into the rolling golden plains of Whiterun Hold. The air clears, the jagged rocks give way to swaying wheat, and the sky opens up into a vast, uninterrupted dome of azure. In the distance you see a village. It looks perfect. Cobblestone streets, a rarity in rural Skyrim, neat rows of crops, a windmill lazily turning in the breeze, and an inn called the Frostfruit Inn that sounds positively delightful. This is Rorikstead. On the surface, Rorikstead is the best place to live in Skyrim. It is quiet, the soil is rich, and the war seems far away. But we aren't here for the surface. We are here because Rorikstead is arguably the most terrifying location in the entire province, precisely because it looks so safe. If Morthal is a horror movie about a swamp monster, Rorikstead is a psychological thriller about a cult that smiles while they bury you in the cornfield. To live in Rorikstead is to live in the uncanny valley of towns. Everything is just a little bit too perfect. The crops never fail. Even when the rest of Skyrim is freezing and starving during a harsh winter, Rorikstead's farms are booming. Rorik, the town's founder and leader, will proudly tell you that this is due to hard work and good soil. He claims he bought this land after fighting in the Great War, founded the town, and named it after himself. It's a nice story. It's a wholesome story. It is also a lie. This brings us to the core in-game fact that unsettles law scholars. The timeline doesn't match. Rorik is an elderly man, yes, but he's a human. He fought in the Great War, which ended 30 years ago. However, if you read the in-game books regarding the Dragon Mounds and ancient history, specifically documents detailing the holdings of Whiterun from the First Era, Rorikstead is listed. There are records of this town existing thousands of years ago. How can a town be named after a man who is still alive, when the town has existed for millennia? There are two possibilities, and living here means you're trapped in one of them. Either Rorik is a liar who simply renamed an old ruin to stroke his ego, or, and this is the theory that keeps people awake at night, Rorik is not what he seems. Perhaps he has been here a very, very long time. Let's look at the demographics. If you move to Rorikstead, you will notice a disturbing pattern among your neighbours. There are almost no mothers. Rorik's wife, dead. The local farmer Lemkil's wife, dead. Juan Manette, the town healer, has no family. The entire village is populated by widowers and their children. In a harsh land like Skyrim, people die, sure, but for every single key female figure to die in childbirth or shortly after. That is a statistical anomaly that screams blood magic. This fuels the prevailing community debate and fan theory, the Rorikstead-Daedric Pact. The theory suggests that the town's incredible agricultural success is the result of a deal with a Daedric prince, likely Clavica's Vial or perhaps a more obscure spirit. The price for the bumper crops, the blessing that keeps the soil rich even in the tundra, is the souls of the women who bear children here. Imagine living in a town where you suspect your bumper crop of wheat is fertilized with the life force of your wife. You look at your neighbor, Lemkil. His name is literally an anagram for kill me, a dark developer joke, or a cry for help. He is a bitter, abusive man who beats his daughters and complains about his dead wife. But his potatoes are excellent. In Rorikstead, prosperity is directly linked to tragedy. The richer the harvest, the fresher the grave. Then there is Juan Manette. He is the only Breton in a town of Nords, posing as a simple healer. But if you pick the lock to his room in the Frostfruit Inn, you don't find bandages and potions, you find soul gems. Why does a village doctor need a stash of black and grand soul gems? He isn't enchanting weapons for the war. He is the magical anchor of the town. Rorik is the face, but Juwain is the power. Juwain is also secretly teaching magic to Sissel, one of Lemkil's daughters. Sissel is a sweet girl, constantly bullied by her sister Britti and beaten by her father. But Sissel has visions. She tells the player she dreams of a good dragon, an old grey one who lives on a mountain. She is dreaming of Parthenax. Sissel is the only person in Rorikstead who seems to have a connection to the divine or the true nature of the world, and she is treated like garbage. Living here means watching a child prophet being abused by a father who cares more about his cabbages than his flesh and blood. Let's call back to our first stop, Helgen. Remember Lokir? Lokir of Rorikstead. The horse thief who died begging the divines for help. He wasn't just running to Hammerfell, he was running from Rorikstead. Why does a man flee paradise? Maybe Lokir figured it out. Maybe he realised it was his turn to pay the toll, or maybe he saw what Joanne was doing in the cellar. His desperation in that cart takes on a new light. He wasn't just afraid of the executioner, he was terrified of being sent back home. He died because he left the protection of the Pact. The geography creates a false sense of security. You are in the plains with visibility for miles. You can see threats coming, but the threat is already inside. The town has no guards of its own, relying on Whiterun patrols that rarely stop by. Why would they? Nothing bad ever happens in Rorikstead. That's the camouflage. The lack of crime is the crime. There is an obscure lore tidbit found in the Creation Club content Golden Hills Plantation, located just outside Rorikstead. It deals with a family murdered by a ghost because of a poisoned sweet roll and greed. It reinforces the idea that the soil around here brings out the absolute worst in people. The land is cursed with greed. If you live here, you're also living on top of a dragon burial mound. Right on the edge of town there is a massive excavation site. While dragon mounds are everywhere, this one is practically in the backyard. When Alduin returns, he resurrects the dragon Nahagliv right there. The residents don't seem nearly as terrified as they should be. It's almost as if they are used to proximity to ancient winged horrors. The social atmosphere is stiflingly nice. Everyone is polite. Eric the Slayer, the innkeeper's son, wants to be an adventurer. He is the Luke Skywalker of the village, young, naive, staring at the horizon. His father Mralki is terrified to let him go. Is it just parental worry? Or does Mralki know that anyone who leaves the Pact dies? When you help Eric leave, you feel like you're breaking him out of a cult compound. You aren't just buying him armor, you're saving his soul from the harvest. Let's talk about the food. It's everywhere. Rorikstead supplies much of the food for Solitude and Whiterun. If the theory holds, then half of Skyrim is eating bread made from blood magic wheat. You, as a resident, are a cog in a machine that exports cursed grain to the rest of the province. You are complicit. And consider the perfect health of the town. Aside from the dead mothers, nobody seems to get sick. No ataxia, no rattles. In the Middle Ages, which Skyrim mimics, a village without disease is a village dealing with the devil. Juan Manette claims to be a healer, but we never see him heal anyone. Maybe he doesn't have to. Maybe the Pact keeps everyone healthy enough to work the fields until it's time for them to be retired. The scenery itself begins to feel hostile after a while. The mountains loom in the distance, but the plains are flat and exposed. There is nowhere to hide. If you wanted to have a private conversation, someone would see you. If you wanted to sneak away in the night, Rorik would see you from his porch. The layout of the town is a panopticon. It is designed for observation. Even the banner of the town is odd. A stylized horse's head. A reference to the stables. Rorikstead doesn't have a massive stable operation. Whiterun does. Or is it a reference to the Headless Horseman? Yes, the ghost of the Headless Horseman, Ragnar the Red, is often seen riding through the plains near Rorikstead at night. He eventually stops at Hamvir's Rest, but his route takes him past the village. A restless spirit, decapitated, riding eternally. Is he a victim of the town's justice? A warning to those who lose their heads over the secret. To live in Rorikstead is to live with a knot in your stomach that never goes away. You attend the harvest festival, you drink the mead, you smile at Rorik, and you try not to look at the fresh dirt in the graveyard. You try not to ask why Lemkil's wife died screaming. You try not to wonder why Joanne is chanting in his room at 3 a.m. In the other worst places, the danger is obvious. Fire, ice, Falmer, vampires. In Rorikstead, the danger is a sunny day and a smiling neighbour offering you a piece of fruit. And that, dear adventurers, is why you will die here. You won't die fighting. You will die because you ate the apple, and the soil demanded a return on its investment. Leaving the deceptive sunny silence of Rorikstead, we travel east, crossing the spine of the world to descend into the volcanic, steaming lowlands of Eastmarch. Here, hidden in a deep, narrow gorge where the sun only visits for a few hours a day, lies Darkwater Crossing. If Rorikstead is a town hiding a secret, Darkwater Crossing is a town hiding from the world, and doing a terrible job of it. On the map, it is designated as a mining settlement. In reality, it is a campsite that got out of hand. There are barely any permanent structures here. People live in tents or rickety wooden shacks that lean precariously against the damp rock face. To live in Darkwater Crossing is to live in a state of permanent impermanence. You are camping, forever, in a war zone. The geography of this place is its defining curse. The settlement is located at the bottom of a steep canyon right next to the roaring Darkwater Falls. While the waterfall is scenic, a favourite spot for screenshot hunting tourists, living next to it is a nightmare. The roar of the water is deafening and constant. You cannot hear a conversation 3 feet away without shouting. More importantly, you cannot hear an enemy approaching until their sword is already in your ribs. This brings us to the core in-game fact that puts Darkwater Crossing on the map. This is where Ulfric Stormcloak was captured. Before the game even begins, the events that lead to the opening cart ride happen right here. This tiny muddy camp was the site of the most significant military ambush in recent Skyrim history. General Tullius and the Imperial Legion managed to corner the leader of the rebellion here. Why? Look at the terrain. It is a tactical kill box. There is one road in and one road out. The cliffs above offer perfect vantage points for archers to rain death down on anyone foolish enough to camp by the river. If you live here, you're living in the exact spot where the Bear of Markarth was put in chains. The residents know this. They know their home is a natural mousetrap. Every time a rock skitters down the cliff face, they flinch, wondering if the Legion is back to finish the job, or if the Falmer have come to tie up loose ends. The shadow of that ambush hangs over the camp heavier than the fog, and speaking of fog, let's talk about the climate. Darkwater Crossing sits in a geothermal zone. The ground is warm, dotted with vents that spew steam and sulphur into the air. But the air coming down from the mountains is freezing. This clash of temperatures creates a perpetual thick mist. Everything is damp. Always. Your clothes never dry. Your bedroll is always slightly soggy. The leather of your boots rots twice as fast. You're essentially living in a cold sauna that smells like rotten eggs. The economy revolves around the Golden Rock mine, which produces corundum. It's a valuable metal, used for alloying with steel to make stronger armour. This makes the camp a strategic target. During the Civil War, control of this mine is vital. This means that as a resident, you are not just a miner, you are a military asset. The Stormcloaks usually hold the crossing, but their presence is minimal. Often you will see maybe 1 or 2 soldiers leaning on a spear, looking bored. They cannot defend this place. If a dragon attacks, and they frequently do given the proximity to the peaks, or if the Empire decides to push, you are on your own. The social dynamic here is dominated by the tragic figure of Annika Cragjumper. She's the matriarch of the camp, though she would hate that title. Annika was once an adventurer. She explored ruins, fought bandits, and saw the world. Now, she's stuck in a gorge, married to Werner Rockchucker, a man whose entire personality is I like digging holes. Listening to Annika's dialogue offers a window into the soul-crushing boredom of Darkwater Crossing. She constantly talks about missing the open road. She urges her daughter, Sylgia, who smartly moved to Shaw's Stone, to stay away and live her own life. Annika is a caged bird. She is the personification of the midlife crisis, but instead of buying a sports car, she offers to follow the Dragonborn into a dungeon just to feel something other than the damp mist on her face. Living next to her means listening to the constant lament of wasted potential. It's depressing. It's a reminder that this camp is where dreams go to settle down and die. But boredom isn't the only thing that kills you here. Let's discuss the local wildlife. Darkwater Crossing is located perilously close to the wilderness of the Rift. Bears and sabercats frequently wander down the slope, attracted by the smell of cooking fires. However, the real danger is much older and much deeper. This brings us to the obscure lore tidbit regarding Darkwater Pass. Just up the river, behind the waterfall, is a cave entrance. Most residents ignore it. They shouldn't. That cave connects directly to a massive subterranean network infested with Falmer. We mentioned the Falmer in the Blackreach section, but here, the threat is intimate. The Falmer venture out of Darkwater Pass at night. They slink along the riverbanks, invisible in the fog and the noise of the waterfall. This isn't a hypothetical threat. The local Argonian miner, Dekethus, actually goes missing. When you find him, he has been dragged into the pass by the Falmer. They didn't kill him immediately, they kept him in a cage, likely for torture or slave labour. Think about that proximity. You're sleeping in a tent, a thin layer of canvas separating you from the world. A few hundred yards away, blind, poisonous elves are crawling out of the earth to kidnap your neighbours. If Dekethus, an Argonian who can breathe underwater and is naturally stealthy, can get snatched, what chance do you have? Living in Darkwater Crossing is like living next to an unlocked door to the underworld. There is a heated community debate and fan theory surrounding the traitor of Darkwater. We know Ulfric was captured here, but how did Tullius know exactly where he was? The ambush was too perfect. The theory suggests that someone in Darkwater Crossing sold Ulfric out. Was it Disease-Ridden, the Dark Elf who has no love for the racist Stormcloaks? Was it Annika, looking for a payout to fund her escape from domestic life? Or perhaps Verna, who just wanted the war to move away from his mine? If this theory is true, it means you are living among spies and traitors. The community is small, fewer than 10 people. If one of them is an Imperial informant, the paranoia level is off the charts. You aren't just watching the cliffs, you are watching your friends. Every time someone heads to Windhelm for supplies, you wonder if they are reporting to the general. Let's consider the amenities, or lack thereof. There is no inn, there is no shop, there is no temple. If you get sick, Disease-Ridden is a healer, but he works in the mines all day. His medical supplies are likely covered in corundum dust. If you need food, you fish in the river, hoping you don't catch something that has been mutated by the volcanic runoff. The defensibility is effectively 0. We established it's a kill box, but it's also difficult to flee. The walls of the gorge are steep. If you are attacked, you have to run up a mountain or swim down a raging river. Neither is a good option. The camp is a dead end. Furthermore, the Eldergleam Sanctuary is nearby. While this sounds nice, a holy place of Kinnereth, it brings its own problems. The sanctuary is guarded by Spriggans and fanatic pilgrims. Sometimes, the Spriggans wander. A Spriggan matron is a force of nature that can turn the local wildlife against you. Imagine the bears and mudcrabs suddenly coordinating an attack on your tent because you chopped down the wrong tree for firewood. Nature itself is weaponized in this region. The ground you walk on is treacherous. The geothermal vents are not fenced off. It is entirely possible to stumble in the dark, remember, it is very dark here, and step right onto a vent scalding your leg with superheated steam. It's a workplace safety nightmare. The Nords don't believe in OSHA, and Darkwater Crossing is the prime example of why they should. Even the soundscape contributes to the misery. In other towns, the music is swelling and heroic. In Darkwater Crossing, the soundtrack is often subdued, mixing with the relentless white noise of the falls. It creates a trance-like state. Days bleed into nights. You mine the rock, you eat the fish, you sleep in the damp. It is a life of grinding repetition. The political alignment of the town is also awkward. It is technically an Eastmarch, Ulfric's hold. But many of the residents don't seem to care about the Stormcloak cause. They are just workers. Yet, because of the location's history, they are marked. If the Empire wins, Darkwater Crossing will be remembered as the place the rebellion started and ended. If the Stormcloaks win, it will be a shrine to Ulfric's martyrdom, even though he survived. You are a prop in a political theatre you didn't buy tickets for. Finally, there is the isolation. You are far from Windhelm. You are far from Riften. You are in the middle of nowhere, at the bottom of a hole. If you scream for help, the waterfall swallows the sound. If you light a signal fire, the fog swallows the light. You are invisible. Darkwater Crossing is the worst place to live because it offers the illusion of freedom. It's just a camp I can leave any time. But the reality of a prison. The geography traps you, the economy binds you, and the Falmer are waiting for you to try to leave. It is a wet, cold, loud grave where you work until your back breaks, and your only legacy is a chunk of corundum that will be turned into a helmet for a bandit to wear. From the damp, foggy gorges of Eastmarch, we don't just go to another town, we go down. Deep down. We are leaving the sky entirely behind. Welcome to Blackreach. To the uninitiated adventurer, Blackreach looks like a dream. You step out of the Dwemer elevator, and your breath catches in your throat. It is a massive subterranean cavern, vast enough to hold its own weather system. Giant bioluminescent mushrooms the size of towers glow with a soft alien blue light. Shimmering spores float through the air like slow-motion snow. A massive artificial sun hangs in the centre, bathing the ancient stone city below in an eerie amber twilight. It is undeniably the most beautiful location in Skyrim. And it is, without a shadow of a doubt, the absolute worst place to try and live. If the other locations on this list are dangerous neighbourhoods, Blackreach is a hostile alien planet. Humans, mer and beastfolk were not designed to exist here. The air is stale, recycled for thousands of years, heavy with the metallic taste of Dwemer oil, and the musty, choking scent of fungal spores. There is no day or night cycle here. There is only the eternal glowing gloom. If you lived here, your circadian rhythm would shatter within a week. You would lose all concept of time, existing in a perpetual state of jet-lag delirium. The core in-game fact that defines the Blackreach experience is the Falmer presence. We aren't talking about a few raiding parties like in Darkwater Crossing. This is their capital. This is their nest. The betrayed, the twisted descendants of the Snow Elves, rule this dark kingdom. They patrol the silent roads of the Dwemer city, accompanied by their livestock, the chittering armoured nightmares known as Chorus. Living in Blackreach means you are the intruder. You are the pest. To the Falmer, you are either a threat to be eliminated or a resource to be harvested. Players often stumble upon the Falmer servants, human thralls who wander the roads, mindless and broken. This is the fate of a resident here. You don't get to set up a cosy camp and admire the mushrooms. You get captured, broken, and turned into a hollow shell that patrols the silence for your blind masters. Let's talk about the neighbours who aren't elves. In a baffling display of ecosystem horror, Blackreach is home to giants. Yes, surface-dwelling giants roam these caverns. How did they get down here? Did they fall? Were they dragged? Or, more terrifyingly, have they always been here, evolving in the dark? Seeing a giant looming out of the fungal mist is a surreal terror. They stomp along the obsidian roads, their footsteps echoing for miles. If a giant gets angry on the surface, you can run into the woods. In Blackreach, there is nowhere to run. You are in a bottle. Then there is the crimson nirnroot. This rare plant grows only in Blackreach. It is prized by alchemists, but for a resident, it is a form of psychological torture. Why? Because nirnroot hums. It emits a constant oscillating chime. On the surface, one plant is annoying. In Blackreach, there are 40 or 50 of them, their sounds echoing off the cavern walls, mixing with the mechanical whirring of the Dwemer pipes. The soundscape of Blackreach is a maddening, discordant symphony that never stops. This brings us to the tragic tale of Sinderian. He's the obscure lore anchor for this section. Sinderian was a master alchemist from the Oblivion Crisis era. Yes, the same elf from Skingrad in the previous game. He moved to Blackreach to study the Crimson Nirnroot. He set up a field laboratory, a small Dwemer building he squatted in. And that is where you find his skeleton. He died down here, clutching his research. Sinderian's fate is the ultimate review of Blackreach as a residential area. Here was a master of his craft, likely powerful and prepared, and the dark eventually got him. His skeleton is riddled with Dwemer arrows, or perhaps Falmer weapons. His field journal details the struggle. He wasn't killed by a dragon or a war. He was killed by the attrition of living in a place where everything, the plants, the machines, the natives, wants you dead. The architecture itself is a hazard. The Dwemer city is crumbling. Massive centurions still patrol the streets, following patrol routes set 4,000 years ago. They are rusted, glitchy, and lethal. You might be walking down a path that looks safe, only to trigger a pressure plate that activates a spinning blade trap, or wakes up a dwarven sphere that has been sleeping in a wall for an era. The city is a minefield of automated defense systems that don't know the war ended. There is a fascinating community debate regarding the artificial sun that hangs above the debate hall. It is a massive glowing orange orb. What is it? Is it a lamp? A magical construct? Some fans theorize it is a contained piece of Aetherius, a literal captured star. Others believe it is the heart of the city's tonal architecture system. But there is a secret associated with it that turns this debate into a survival horror scenario. If you use the unrelenting force shout on the artificial sun, something answers. The dragon Volthuriol. Think about the implications. A dragon has been hiding inside the artificial sun, or circling in the darkness above it for centuries. If you live in Blackreach, you are living under a sun that is actually a dragon's bedroom. At any moment the sky could wake up and breathe fire on you. Volthuriol is unique. He doesn't fly around initially. He crawls on the ground, stalking you like a massive lizard. It suggests he is adapted to the cavern, becoming an apex predator of the dark. The isolation in Blackreach is absolute. To enter or leave, you need the attunement sphere, a specific Dwemer key. Without it, the great lifts are sealed. If you lose your sphere, or if it breaks, you are buried alive. There is no climbing out. The ceiling is miles up, and the elevator shafts are smooth metal. You're sealed in a tomb the size of a city. Water is available, but would you drink it? The pools in Blackreach glow, the mushrooms drop spores into them, the chorus swim in them. The water is likely a hallucinogenic cocktail of heavy metals and fungal toxins. Survival here requires filtration systems you simply don't have. And let's consider the darkness itself. Even with the bioluminescence, the shadows in Blackreach are deep. This is the domain of the Wisp Mother. These spectral entities float over the silent waters, luring the unwary to their deaths. In the silence of the cavern, the only thing worse than the Nirnroot humming is the soft, beckoning whisper of a ghost that wants to freeze the marrow in your bones. There is also a massive fan theory that Blackreach connects to every Dwemer ruin in Skyrim, and we only see a fraction of it. The map suggests tunnels branching off into the infinite dark. If you live here, you're at the nexus of a subterranean highway system used by things that should not exist. You might hear knocking on the walls of your shelter and realise it's coming from deep within the rock, from a tunnel that isn't on any map. The Falmer have also begun to build their own structures here. Primitive, chitinous huts made from the shells of giant bugs. It's a horrifying juxtaposition. The clean geometric lines of the Dwemer brass clashing with the organic, gross architecture of the Falmer. It visualises the decay of the world. You're living in the ruins of logic, being consumed by madness. Finally, there is the Jodvain factor. You can mine soul gems directly from the rock here. It implies the cavern is saturated with soul energy. The very walls are hungry. The eerie feeling you get down here, the sense of being watched, might be the latent energy of thousands of empty soul gems waiting to be filled. Blackreach is not a home, it is an aquarium for monsters. It is a place where the laws of nature are suspended, replaced by the cold logic of machines and the savage hunger of the blind. It is beautiful, yes, but it is the beauty of a poisonous flower. You can admire it from a screenshot, but if you try to plant your roots there, you will become just another skeleton for the next adventurer to loot. Ascending from the claustrophobic glowing depths of Blackreach, we gasp for fresh air, only to choke on the freezing thin oxygen of the mountain passes. We travel south of Morthal, climbing higher into the peaks, until the trees disappear and the stone turns grey and ancient. We have arrived at Labyrinthian. If Blackreach is a beautiful alien planet, Labyrinthian is a graveyard that hates you personally. It is not just a ruin, it is a colossal city of the dead, a sprawling complex of arches, courtyards and temples that once served as the capital of the dragon cult. But we aren't here to study history. We're here to discuss why setting up a bedroll in these ruins is a guaranteed way to die of exhaustion without ever lifting a finger. The defining feature of Labyrinthian, and the core in-game fact that scars every mage player's memory, is the Magicka Drain. As you approach the inner sanctum, a voice booms in your head, speaking in a tongue you can barely understand, and suddenly, your energy evaporates. Your Magicka bar plummets to zero. Now, translate this gameplay mechanic into a living situation. In the lore, Magicka isn't just ammo for spells. It is connected to your life force, your mental acuity, and your will to act. Living in Labyrinthian means existing in a field of suppression. It is a place that actively eats your energy. You would wake up tired. You would walk to the campfire tired. You would try to formulate a thought, only to feel it slip away like water through a sieve. It is a location designed to inflict supernatural depression. The source of this drain is Morthal, one of the high-ranking dragon priests, who is sealed within the main ruin. He's possessing the Staff of Magnus, an artifact capable of absorbing vast amounts of power. Living here means you are the battery for an undead lich. He's sipping on your soul like a juice box while you try to cook your dinner. The voice you hear, Morthal taunting Savos-Aren, would be your constant companion. Imagine a roommate who never sleeps, screams in an ancient language, and actively makes you stupider just by being in the next room. Let's talk about the neighbours. Labyrinthian is infested with frost trolls. These aren't the solitary wanderers you find on the roads. They are an army. They have claimed the outer courtyards as their nesting grounds. Frost trolls are territorial, regenerating monstrosities that can rip a man in half. In any other city, you have guards to handle pests. In Labyrinthian, the pests are the landlords. To check your mail, if you had any, you would need to sprint past a gauntlet of three-eyed apes that heal faster than you can hurt them. But the trolls are just the biological threat. The true horror is the spectral residue of the place. This brings us to the tragic narrative of Savos-Aren and his students. As you explore the ruins, You encounter the ghosts of the college expedition that failed years ago. You see the spectral reenactments of their deaths, Hafna, Atma, Girduin. They came here full of hope, and one by one the ruin chewed them up. If you live here, you're squatting among these ghosts. You are watching a time loop of failure. The emotional weight of the place is crushing. Sarvozaran sacrificed his friends to seal Morokei, leaving 2 of them enthralled as eternal jailers. You're living in a crime scene that has been frozen in time. The air is thick with betrayal and regret. It's not just a haunted house. It's a theatre of trauma that plays the same tragedy on repeat every night. There is an obscure lore tidbit that adds a layer of cosmic horror to your residency. Inside the ruins, there is a small, unassuming room containing a wooden mask. If you put this mask on while standing in that room, you're transported back in time to the era of the dragon cult, to the sanctuary of Bromjunar. You see the temple in its prime, and you see the busts of the dragon priests. This implies that Labyrinthian is unstuck in time. The barrier between the now of the ruined city and the then of the cult's glory is terrifyingly thin. Living here puts you at risk of slipping through the cracks. You might take a wrong turn and end up in the Merethic era, surrounded by cultists who will sacrifice you to Alduin before you can say, time travel paradox. The wooden mask suggests that the entire location is a threshold, a liminal space where reality is soft and malleable. We must also address the skeletal dragon. Deep inside the ruin, in a room filled with bones, a massive pile of dragon bones reanimates and attacks. This is not a normal dragon. It doesn't have a soul. It doesn't talk. It is a necromantic abomination. This suggests that the ambient magic in Labyrinthian is so twisted that even the sacred permanence of dragon death is violated. If you die here, do you stay dead? Or does the ruin pick you back up, strip the flesh from your bones, and force you to guard a door for eternity? The presence of the Draugr, thousands of them, suggest the latter. The weather is atrocious. Labyrinthian sits in a high-altitude saddle between mountains. It acts as a wind tunnel. The snow is deep and unrelenting. Because it is a ruin, there are no roofs on the outer sections. You're exposed to the elements constantly. The stone retains the cold, creating a refrigerator effect. You're being drained of magicka on the inside and heat on the outside. Then there is the matter of Shalidor's Maze. This is a separate section of the complex designed by the legendary Archmage Shalidor. It is a literal testing ground, a maze filled with magical traps, sigils, and a Dremora at the end. Shalidor built this to test prospective archmages. Consider the ego required to build a city-sized maze just to mess with students. If you live here, this is your backyard. You can't just go for a walk, you have to solve a puzzle. I'm just going to get some firewood. Oh, wait, I have to cast a destruction spell on this sigil or the floor will turn to lava. It is a living environment designed by a mad genius to weed out the weak. If you are not an Archmage-level wizard, the architecture itself discriminates against you. The fan community has long debated the connection between the dragon priests and the geography of the ruin. Connachric, the warlord, is the final mask obtained here. The theory suggests that Labyrinthian wasn't just a temple, it was the seat of governance for the entire dragon cult. This means the concentration of power here was once absolute. The ghosts of the cultists aren't just random undead, they are the spirits of the most powerful tyrants in human history. You are squatting in the pentagon of the Dragon Empire. The malice in the stone is ancient and political. Sound plays a huge role in the horror of Labyrinthian. The wind whistling through the broken arches creates a mournful flute-like sound. But beneath the wind there is the chanting. The Draugr are constantly chanting in the crypts. Unslared, Crosis. The walls vibrate with it. It is a psychological assault. You can never enjoy silence. You're always listening to the prayers of the damned. Let's look at the Wisp Mothers again. Like Blackreach and the Pale, Labyrinthian attracts them. They hover in the snowy courtyards looking like pale angels. But as we know, they are parasites. They summon wisps to drain your life. Between Morokei draining your magic and the Wisp Mothers draining your health, you are being metabolized by the environment from 2 different directions. The Equilibrium spell tome is found here. This is a spell that converts your health into magicka. It is a perfect metaphor for living in Labyrinthian. To do anything, to have any energy, you have to hurt yourself. The environment forces a transaction. Blood for power. It is a place that encourages self-destruction. Access is a nightmare. The road to Labyrinthian is not maintained. It is choked with rubble and snowdrifts. Supply lines are impossible. You cannot get a pizza delivered here, and you certainly can't get a caravan to bring you supplies. You're completely cut off from civilization. If you run out of food, your options are troll meat, which tastes like rancid fat, or hunting the occasional skeever. And finally, consider the sheer scale of the place. It is too big for a human. The doors are massive, built for giants or to intimidate the masses. The steps are steep. You feel small in Labyrinthian. You feel insignificant. It is architecture designed to make you feel like a bug under the boot of a god. It crushes your ego before it crushes your skull. Living in Labyrinthian is a slow, fading death. You don't go out in a blaze of glory, you just stop. The staff drains your will, the cold numbs your body, and the ghosts whisper that it's easier to just lie down in the snow and join them. And eventually you do. You become just another skeleton in a robe, waiting for the next Dragonborn to loot 3 gold pieces from your urn. Leaving the energy-draining ruins of Labyrinthian, we flee north until we hit the sea, then bargain for passage across the freezing black waves to an island that does not appear on most respectable maps. We're heading to the border of High Rock and Skyrim, to a fortress that stands as a gothic sore upon the landscape. Welcome to Castle Volkihar. If Labyrinthian is a graveyard, Castle Volkihar is a slaughterhouse dressed up in velvet and fine masonry. It is the headquarters of the oldest, most powerful vampire clan in Skyrim. From the outside, it looks majestic in a terrifying way, soaring spires, gargoyles perched on every ledge, and a bridge lined with braziers that burn with an unnatural blue flame. But we aren't here to marvel at the architecture or to join the court as a Lord of the Night. We're here to examine the reality of living in this castle as a mortal. And as a mortal in Castle Volkihar, you have only one job title: cattle. To live here is to be reduced to livestock. In the other locations we visited, death is a possibility, a risk of the environment. In Volkihar, your death is the lunch menu. But the horror isn't just the dying, it's the living before the dying. The castle keeps a stock of human thralls, referred to in the game files and by the vampires themselves simply as vampire cattle. These aren't people anymore. If you look closely at the thralls in the dining hall, you see the emptiness in their eyes. They are under a potent illusion spell or alchemical sedative that strips away their will, their fear, and their personality. Living here means enduring a forced lobotomy. You're awake, you're standing, but you're not there. You exist only to be fed upon when a courtier gets peckish during a debate about politics. You're a juice box with a pulse. The core in-game fact that defines the residential experience here is the cattle pen. It is a literal room in the castle dungeon. It's not a prison cell in the traditional sense, it's a pantry. There are bedrolls on the floor and gates to keep the food from wandering off. But the most disturbing detail is the dining table set right outside the cell doors. The vampires don't even wait for the food to be prepared. They just grab a thrall, drag them a few feet and feed. Imagine the psychological terror of the moments before the enthrallment takes hold. You're brought to this island, likely kidnapped from a coastal village or a shipwreck. You see the monsters in their finery. You see the piles of bones in the corner, the leftovers that the death hounds are gnawing on. You realise that you're no longer a person, you are a resource. And then the magic takes you, and you spend the rest of your short life in a haze, feeling the sharp sting of teeth but unable to scream or run. Let's talk about the Volkihar strain of vampirism specifically. This brings us to an obscure lore tidbit found in the book Immortal Blood. The text describes the various vampire clans of Tamriel. It notes that the Volkihar of eastern Skyrim are known for their ability to reach through the ice of frozen lakes to pull victims under without breaking the surface. Think about what this implies about the island itself. The castle sits on a rocky outcrop surrounded by frozen water. If the lore holds true, the vampires here don't just walk the halls, they utilise the ice as a hunting blind. Living on the island means that the ground beneath you, the frozen shoreline where you might try to escape, is permeable to them, but solid to you. You're walking on top of the shark tank and the sharks can phase through the glass. The social atmosphere of the castle is a viper's nest. Even if you were, by some miracle, a servant who wasn't enthralled, perhaps a smith or a cleaner, you're walking through a minefield of immortal egos. The court is divided. Windhelm and Orthiolf are constantly plotting against each other and Lord Harkon. They view mortals as beneath contempt. To them, you are less than a dog. A dog can be a companion. You are just meat that talks. You would witness the politics of the court, which often involves torture and betrayal. You might be cleaning the floor when Vingalmo decides to test a new destruction spell on you, just to see if it works, or to annoy Orthiolf by killing his favourite servant. Your life has zero value. You're a disposable prop in a game of chess played by beings who lost their humanity eras ago. And then there is the Lord of the Castle, Harkon. He is a tyrant of the highest order. He sacrificed 1,000 innocents to Molag Bal to gain his power. He is willing to kill his own daughter and wife to fulfill a prophecy. If he treats his own family like that, imagine what he thinks of you. Living under Harkon's roof is living in the shadow of a monster who wants to blot out the sun. This brings us to the prevailing community debate, the Tyranny of the Sun plan. Harkon wants to use Auriel's bow to permanently darken the sun. Fans have pointed out for years that this is a suicidal plan. If the sun goes dark, the plants die. If the plants die, the animals die. If the animals die, the humans starve. If the humans starve, the vampires have no food. If you live in Castle Volkihar, you are watching your masters actively plot the destruction of the ecosystem that keeps you alive. It is a terrifying level of short-sightedness. You are trapped in a doomsday cult where the leaders are convinced they are gods, but their plan leads to mass extinction, including their own. It adds a layer of existential dread to the daily horror. You aren't just being eaten, you're watching the world being steered off a cliff. The castle itself is a sensory nightmare. It smells of blood. Fresh blood, old blood, coagulated blood. The blood potions are everywhere, in kegs, in chalices, on the tables. The metallic tang of copper would be permanently stuck in your nose, and beneath the blood, the smell of rot. The castle is filled with skeletons, gargoyles, and deathhounds. Deathhounds are reanimated, rotting dogs. They smell like wet fur and decay. The gargoyles are another hazard. In the lore and game mechanics, they are statues that burst to life to attack intruders. But for a resident, this means you can never trust the decor. Is that statue in the hallway just stone, or is it a monster waiting for a command? You walk with your head down, afraid to make eye contact with the architecture. Let's look at the ruined wing of the castle, where Valerica's study is located. This area is infested with skeletons and feral beasts. It shows that even the vampires can't keep their own house in order. The castle is decaying around them. It is a golden cage that is slowly rusting shut. The moondial in the courtyard is broken, a symbol of the fractured time and reality of the place. There is also the presence of the Moth Priest, Dexian Evicus, if the Dawnguard questline is active. He is captured, enthralled, and forced to read the Elder Scrolls until he goes blind. It reinforces the theme. Knowledge and sanctity mean nothing here. Even a holy priest is just a tool to be used until it breaks, then discarded. We must address the Molag Bal connection. The shrine to Molag Bal in the castle depths is active. This is a direct conduit to the Prince of Domination. The very air in the castle feels heavy, oppressive. It is the weight of a Daedric prince's gaze. Molag Bal is the creator of vampires, the king of rape, the harvester of souls. His influence permeates the stone. Living here is to live in a temple of abuse. Domination is the only law. The strong crush the weak. As a mortal, you are the weakest link in the chain. The isolation is profound. You're on an island in the Sea of Ghosts. The water is freezing. Swimming is death. The only boat is owned by the vampires. Even if you escape the castle, where would you go? The Northwatch Keep is nearby, run by the Thalmor, who would likely just kill you or imprison you. You are caught between the undead and the fascists. Consider the kitchen. The chef is likely a thrall. The ingredients are questionable. Human flesh is an alchemy ingredient found abundantly in the castle. As a mortal resident, what are you eating? Are they feeding you the remains of the other thralls? It is highly probable. To survive in Castle Volkihar, you are likely forced into cannibalism, unknowingly consuming your cellmates to stay healthy enough to be consumed yourself. And the silence. Vampires are predators. They move silently. You don't hear footsteps. You just feel a cold breath on your neck, turn around, and see a pair of glowing orange eyes staring at you from the shadows. The paranoia is constant. You are the mouse in a house full of cats. There is no day or night cycle inside the thick stone walls. The windows are heavy stained glass or boarded up. You live in perpetual gloom. Your skin turns pale, your Bones weaken from lack of vitamin D. You start to look like them, even before they turn you. Finally, there is the Soul Cairn portal. We will visit there next, but its presence in the castle laboratory is a leaking wound in reality. The screams of trapped souls drift through the portal. You can hear the afterlife, and it is not a happy one. It is a constant reminder of where you are going. When the vampires are done with your body, your soul doesn't go to Sovngarde or Aetherius. It likely gets trapped in a black soul gem and sent to the Ideal Masters. Living in Castle Volkihar is the ultimate degradation. You're stripped of your humanity, your dignity, and your soul. You're meat in a velvet room, waiting for the butcher to get hungry. The cold of the island numbs your skin, but the cold of the castle numbs your heart until you are just as empty as the chalices left on the dining table. If Castle Volkihar is the slaughterhouse, the Soul Cairn is the landfill where the scraps are tossed to rot for eternity. We are leaving the physical plane of Amundus entirely now. We are stepping through the shimmering, ominous portal in Valerica's laboratory, feeling the cold suck the breath from our lungs, and emerging into a reality that is composed entirely of regret and the colour purple. Welcome to the Soul Cairn. To call this a place to live is a dark joke. It is a plane of oblivion, yes, but unlike the chaotic infernos of Mehrunes Dagon, or the mad tea parties of Sheogorath, the Soul Cairn is sterile. It is a warehouse. It is a cosmic storage unit for souls that were traded, stolen, or simply unlucky enough to get caught in a black soul gem. If you end up here, you aren't just dead, you're archived. The first thing that hits you is the sky. It is a bruised, violent violet, roiling with storm clouds that never break. There is no sun, only a colossal hole in the reality vortex hanging above, watching you like an unblinking eye. The ground is grey dust and black rock. The flora consists of dead, blackened trees and soul husks, fungal growths that look like shriveled skins, and that is the extent of the scenery. If you live here, this is your view, forever. The core in-game fact that makes this location a survival nightmare is the environmental hostility toward the living. Unless you are a vampire or have allowed a piece of your soul to be trapped before entering, the Soul Cairn actively drains your health. The lightning rods scattered across the landscape don't just provide creepy ambience, they strike you. The large floating crystals drain your life force to feed the realm. Living here as a mortal means being in a constant state of slow-motion necrosis. You're an invasive species in a realm designed for the dead, and the immune system of the plane is trying to purge you. But the true horror is not the environment, it is the landlords. The Soul Cairn is the domain of the Ideal Masters. This brings us to one of the deepest community debates in Elder Scrolls lore. Who or what are the Ideal Masters? We never see them directly, not in a humanoid form. We communicate with them through giant floating pink crystals that hover above coffins. Some fans theorize they were once mortal necromancers from the Merethic era, who achieved a form of pure energy ascension. Others believe they are minor Daedric princes who pooled their resources to corner the market on souls. Whatever they are the ultimate corporate villains. They don't torture you for pleasure like Molag Bal. They don't test you like Boethia. They simply collect you. To the Ideal Masters, you are a battery. You are currency. Living in the Soul Cairn means you are property in a ledger that no one reads. The apathy of the Ideal Masters is more terrifying than the malice of the Daedra. Malice implies they care enough to hate you. The Ideal Masters just want your energy to power their whatever it is they do. Let's look at your neighbours. They fall into 3 categories: Bone Men, Mist Men, and Wrath Men. These aren't just random monsters. They are the final evolutionary stages of the trapped souls. When you first arrive, you're a soul, a wandering ghost, confused and weeping. You might see the spirits of farmers, soldiers, or even cows. Yes, there are cow souls here, wandering aimlessly, looking for a way out. Over time, and time is meaningless here, you lose your memory, you lose your identity, you harden, you pick up a weapon and you join the ranks of the Wrathmen, guarding the borders of a realm you can't escape. Imagine that progression. You start by missing your family, then you forget their faces, then you forget your name, then you forget you were ever human. Finally, you're just a skeleton with a black axe, attacking a dragonborn because you don't know what else to do. It is a slow erasure of the self. We must discuss the St. Giob cameo. This is a delightful and tragic obscure lore tidbit. Players of Morrowind remember Jube as the Dark Elf who wakes you up on the boat. He was later canonised as a saint for driving the cliff racers, annoying flying pests, out of Morrowind. In the Soul Cairn, you find him. He was killed by a Dremora during the Oblivion Crisis and soul-trapped. Now he stands by a campfire, writing his autobiography. But here is the kicker. He doesn't fully grasp the horror of his situation. He's been writing the second volume of his opus for centuries. He asks you to find his missing pages. St. Jub represents the coping mechanism of the Soul Cairn. To survive without going mad, you have to fixate on a task. You have to pretend that finishing your book matters. You have to pretend that someone will read it. But no one will. It's just you, the purple sky, and the endless loop of your own vanity. And then there is Arvak, the skeletal horse. His skull glows with blue fire. He runs through the wasteland terrified, chased by monsters. Even the animals here are tormented. If you love pets, the Soul Cairn is a heartbreak factory. You watch the soul of a faithful steed running in circles, unable to rest, unable to die, driven by phantom fear. Let's talk about the Reaper. Hidden in a dark building called the Reaper's Lair, there is a hidden boss. You have to collect Reaper gem fragments to summon him. He is an executioner-style figure who vomits green slime. The presence of the Reaper implies that there is an internal policing system. If the bonemen get out of line, or if a soul causes too much trouble, the Reaper comes. It's a prison within a prison. The geography is disorienting. The Soul Cairn is flat, but it is divided by massive black walls with barred windows. You can see through them, but you can't pass. It is a maze designed to frustrate. You can see your destination, Valerica's prison or a chest, but you have to walk 3 miles around. A barrier to get there. It is architecture designed to waste time, and since you have eternity, you have a lot of time to waste. Speaking of Valerica, Serana's mother, she has been living here for eras. She created a barrier to keep the Ideal Masters out, but she is still trapped. She speaks of the monotony. She has read every book, studied every spell. She just sits there. Immortality in Mundus offers variety. New wars, new empires, new fashion. Immortality in the Soul Cairn is staring at the same black brick for 4,000 years. It is the ultimate boredom. We also have to address the tragedy of Durnavir. He is the undead dragon who patrols the sky. He wasn't captured, he was tricked. He made a deal with the Ideal Masters to gain necromantic powers, intending to guard Valerica until her death, but she is a vampire. She doesn't die. So Durnavir is bound to the Soul Cairn forever. His body has adapted to the realm. His flesh is rotting, his scales are grey. He tells the Dragonborn that he can no longer exist in Tamriel for long periods because his bond to the Soul Cairn is too strong. The realm has infected him. If you live here, you become part of the geometry. You can't leave because you no longer fit in the real world. You're a square peg that has been warped into a purple triangle. The soundscape is oppressive. It is never quiet. There is a constant low-frequency rumbling of thunder. The soul fissures, cracks in the ground that blow steam, hiss relentlessly. The lightning strikes with a sharp crack, and beneath it all, the wailing. The ambient noise includes the distant, distorted screams of the trapped souls. It is a soundtrack of misery. Diet is a major issue. What do you eat? There are no sweet rolls. There is only the soul husk. It is a gross, fleshy fungus that grows on the dead stone. It resists magic drain, so you have to eat it to survive. Imagine the texture, like chewing on a leathery, tasteless mushroom that might be made of someone's granulated soul. That is your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, forever. The lightning attractors are massive spires that draw electricity from the storm clouds. They convert the lightning into soul gems. This is the industry of the place. The Ideal Masters are farming the weather to create containers for more victims. You're living in a factory floor where the product is misery. There is also the merchant Morven. He stands by his cart offering to trade goods for soul husks. He seems oddly content. He represents the collaborator, the guy who figured out how to hustle in hell. He trades armor and spell tomes for husks. But who is he trading with? The bonemen? It highlights the absurdity of the economy. You are trading trash for trash in a place where nothing has value. The sheer scale of the Soul Cairn is daunting. In the game, it has boundaries, but in the lore, it is infinite. It goes on forever. Miles and miles of purple dust and black walls. If you started walking, you would never find an edge. You would just walk until your legs gave out, and then you would crawl. and then you would become a pile of bones that someone else walks past. There is no sleep here. The sky never changes. You don't get tired in the normal way. You get weary, a deep spiritual exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. You're always awake, always aware of your entrapment. And finally, there is the permanence. In Helgen, you die. In Markarth, you suffer, then die. In the Soul Cairn, the concept of an end is removed. You're denied the release of Aetherius. You're denied the cycle of reincarnation, if you believe in that. You are paused. You're a glitch in the universe that has been swept under the rug. Living in the Soul Cairn is the worst fate because it strips you of the one thing every living creature relies on: hope. There is no rescue party coming. The Dragonborn leaves. Valerica leaves. Durnavir visits Tamriel but has to return. You stay. You stare at the purple sky, you eat your soul husk, and you wait for the day you forget your own name, so you can finally pick up a rusty axe and stop thinking. And finally we ascend one last time. We leave the purple skies of the Soul Cairn. We leave the swamps, the sewers, and the cities. We climb higher than the throat of the world, to the very eastern edge of the map, where the mountains pierce the stratosphere and the air is too thin to breathe. We arrive at the ultimate dead end, Skuldafn. If the Soul Cairn is a prison, Skuldafn is an airlock. It is the final checkpoint before the afterlife, a massive temple complex perched on the jagged peaks of the Gerald Mountains, and it is, without question, the absolute worst place to live in Skyrim because, quite simply, you are not supposed to be there. To live in Skuldafn is to live in exile. The most terrifying fact about this location, the core in-game mechanic that defines it, is its accessibility, or rather, the lack thereof. There are no roads to Skuldafn, there are no mountain passes, no hidden tunnels, no teleportation spells that a mortal wizard can cast. The only way to reach this temple is on the back of a dragon. Think about the logistics of that. If you were to set up a home here, you would be the most isolated human being on the planet. If you run out of food, you can't walk to the market. You can't even climb down. The cliffs are sheer, vertical drops into nothingness. You're stranded on an island in the sky. If your dragon ride decides not to pick you up, and let's be honest, Odahviing has other things to do, you are stuck here until you freeze, starve, or get fusrodad off the ledge by a local resident. And the residents here are not your average bandits. Skuldafn is the elite retirement home for the dragon cult. When you walk through the ruins of Bleakfall's Barrow, you fight restless Draugr who might have been farmers or foot soldiers in life. In Skuldafn, every single enemy is a high-ranking officer. The density of Draugr deathlords and scourges here is mathematically absurd. Living here means your neighbours are ancient Nord warlords who wield ebony weapons and can shout the flesh off your bones. There are no easy fights in Skuldafn. You can't step out to get a breath of fresh air without 3 armoured corpses shouting unrelenting force at you from a balcony. The architecture reflects this martial dominance. The temple is massive, built to intimidate the gods themselves. The stone blocks are larger than the farmhouses in Rorikstead. The bridges span dizzying chasms where the wind howls like a banshee. It is a place built for dragons, not for men. The stairs are too steep, the doorways too high. You feel like an ant crawling through an engine block. Let's discuss the Diamond Claw puzzle. To enter the inner sanctum, you need the Diamond Claw, but where is it found? On a Draugr overlord inside the temple. This implies that the doors are locked from the inside. The cultists sealed themselves in. They didn't want anyone getting in, but more importantly, they didn't want anyone getting out. Living here is a commitment to being buried alive in the clouds. The weather at this altitude is lethal. We aren't just talking about snow, we're talking about a complete lack of thermal retention. You are above the tree line. There is no wood to burn. How do you stay warm? You don't. You huddle in the stone corners, shivering as the wind chills the rock to sub-zero temperatures. The sky here is often clear, which sounds nice, but at night, the lack of cloud cover means the heat escapes instantly into the void. You're sleeping in a vacuum freezer. This brings us to the dragon priest, Nakreen. He stands guard at the very summit, watching over the portal to Sovngarde. His name, in the dragon tongue, translates to vengeance. That is the vibe of the landlord. He wields a powerful shock staff and hovers with the arrogance of a demigod. If you live in Skuldafn, you are living under the regime of vengeance. He holds the key to the afterlife, and he isn't sharing. There is a fascinating fan theory regarding the location of Skuldafn relative to Tamriel. Some lore scholars point out that you cannot see Skuldafn from anywhere else in Skyrim, nor can you see the rest of Skyrim from Skuldafn. When you look down, you see clouds and vague geometry. This has led to the theory that Skuldafn is not actually in the physical province of Skyrim anymore. It might be a pocket realm, or a floating island detached from the continent, suspended by the magic of the portal. If this is true, living in Skuldafn means you have technically left Nirn. You are drifting in a magical orbit. The physics here might be slightly wrong. The gravity feels heavier. The light hits the stone at weird angles. You are in the uncanny valley of geography. We must also talk about the dragons. In most of Skyrim, a dragon attack is an event. In Skuldafn, it is Tuesday. There are always 2 dragons patrolling the airspace above the temple. They are the air force of the cult. Living here means constant aerial bombardment. You cannot have a roof over your head because the ruins are open air. You're exposed to fire and frost breath 24/7. You're the mouse in a hawk's nest. And then there is the portal to Sovngarde itself. A massive column of swirling light, piercing the sky. It is beautiful, yes, but for a living person, it is a cruel joke. That light is the door to heaven. It is the hall of valor where there is endless mead, roasted ox and song, and it is right there. You can touch it, but you cannot enter. According to Nord tradition, you must die valiantly to enter Sovngarde, or you need Nukhreen's staff to open the seal. If you're just a squatter living in the ruins, you are forced to camp on the doorstep of paradise, smelling the feast but eating stale bread. It is the ultimate Tantalus torture. You are cold, hungry, and surrounded by zombies, while the greatest party in the universe is happening 10 feet away. There is an obscure lore tidbit about the word Skuldafn itself. It likely derives from the Old Norse word skuld, meaning debt or future, and the name of one of the Norns, and afn, which is obscure but could imply a place or holding. It can be interpreted as the holding place of debt. You are here to pay what you owe. It is a purgatory. The cultists here are waiting. They are waiting for Alduin to eat the world so they can be rewarded. They have been waiting for thousands of years. The stagnation is palpable. The silence here is different from the silence of Morthal or the Soul Cairn. It is the silence of the void. The air is so thin that sound doesn't carry well. Everything sounds muffled, distant. It creates a sense of derealization. You feel like you are in a dream or a nightmare where you try to scream but no sound comes out. Let's consider the no return mechanic. In the game, once you leave Skuldafn and enter Sovngarde, you can never come back. The location disappears from your map. You cannot fast travel here. It is a one-time experience. For a resident, this means there is no safety net. If you slip and fall, no rescue party can find you. If you get sick, no healer can reach you. You're off the grid in the most absolute sense possible. You have been deleted from the map of the known world. The oil slicks on the ground, traps set by the Draugr are everywhere. In the freezing cold, the oil is thick and sludge-like. One wrong step during a fight and you are sliding into a fire jet. The temple is a machine designed to kill intruders, but it doesn't distinguish between an intruder and a resident. You are living inside a loaded gun. And finally, there is the presence of Alduin himself. This is his gateway. He uses this portal to travel to Sovngarde to eat the souls of the dead. Living in Skuldafn means you are the doorman for the World Eater. You see him come and go, bloated with the souls of your ancestors. You witness the cosmic cycle of consumption up close. It renders all mortal concerns meaningless. Who cares about the civil war or the price of iron ingots when a black dragon is vomiting the souls of history into the sky above your head? Skuldafn is the worst place to live because it is the end of hope. It is the end of the path. There is nowhere to go from here but death. You are trapped on a frozen peak, guarding a door you can't open, serving a god who wants to eat you, waiting for a sunrise that feels colder than the night. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers, casting long, dancing shadows across the room. The wind outside has quieted to a gentle whisper, tapping soft, snowy fingers against the glass. We have travelled far tonight, you and I. We have walked through the charred remains of Helgen, smelled the stagnant rot of the Ratway, and shivered in the frozen alleys of the Grey Quarter. We have descended into the madness of Blackreach and climbed to the lonely, lethal heights of Skuldafn. We have seen the places where the world of Skyrim is most hostile, where the land itself seems to reject the presence of the living. But you are not there. You are here. You are safe. The walls around you are solid. The air you breathe is warm and sweet. There are no Draugr in the hallway, no Falmer in the basement, and the only dragon nearby is the story we have just finished telling. Let the tension drain from your shoulders. Let your jaw unclench. The journey is over. The map is folded away. These dangerous places are just memories now, fading into the mist of your imagination as sleep begins to take hold. You have survived the journey, adventurer. You have seen the worst, and you have returned unscathed. Now, the night belongs to you. The darkness is not a threat, but a blanket. A soft, heavy comfort pulling you down into a deep, dreamless rest. Let the world fade. Let the lore settle. It will all be there when you wake up, but for now, there is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be. Sweet dreams.